Chapter 356. In the long history of the Western continent, the battle of legendary rank was not common. Once one entered the legendary rank, it was equivalent to stepping into a whole new field. In the ancient times, when the barrier between the mortal world and the heaven was not so deep, the legendary rank was called the first step to become a god. And with the opportunity to become a god, who would be willing to fight to the death? Not to mention the battle of legendary rank was too far-reaching. A little bit of carelessness could cause the land to sink, volcanoes to erupt, rivers to flow backward, and people to be plunged into misery and suffering. Although there was no heavenly tribulation in the Western continent, the special cultural tradition and the law of power made the barrier between the Western continent profession and ordinary people not so deep. Therefore, even the legendary rank would have many treasured people in the mortal world, which became their fetters. For the people of the Western continent, it has been a long time since they saw the legendary level experts go all out in a fight. In the past 100 years, although there were many fights between legendary level experts, they were basically superficial, and no one would come out with their real skills. But now, whether it was Pope Billy or Supreme Tianyu, neither of them would hide even the slightest bit. Because hiding was the same as courting death. Although this one-on-one duel was designed by Feng Yin based on the spirit of humanity to avoid excessive casualties, it was still a bloody and cruel war with no warmth. In the first round of the fight, the two sides were already angry. The first one to make a move was Tianyu. During the long confrontation of breath, Tianyu realized that the Pope was backed by the Holy City and had a powerful momentum, so he could not take any advantage. Therefore, he simply released the monster blade in his hand to seize the initiative. This weapon, which was comparable to an immortal treasure, suddenly expanded thousands of times, like a continuous mountain range, pressing down from the sky. Seeing this situation, the Pope's complexion could not help but change. Because although Tianyu's blade seemed slow and clumsy, he could not avoid it. Because Tianyu's blade was aimed at the Taba city behind the Pope. After the bewitching blade expanded thousands of times, when this blade slashed down, there was no need to add any special magic power. Just the size and weight of the blade could destroy a city and destroy a country. Although the sacred city had a spell to protect the city, it could not withstand such a powerful and heavy blade. However, as the leader of the church, how could the Pope be so easy to deal with? His expression changed. He was shocked that his opponent was still so despicable and shameless at this time, but it wasn't that he didn't have a way to deal with it. On the contrary, this kind of powerful and heavy attack was exactly what he wanted. In terms of strength, who could compare with the Holy Light religion that had hundreds of millions of believers? The Pope was the leader of millions of believers, and he was backed by the Holy City. He was confident that he would be able to fight even if the gods were to descend to earth, let alone a mere mad dog. Heretics, repent under the Holy Light. When the heavenly moon demon blade was about to reach the top of his head, the Pope raised the staff that symbolized supreme authority high up. Although it was silent, the mountain-like demon blade suddenly stopped in mid-air, unable to slash down even half an inch. However, the Pope's complexion changed again, because this saber was blocked too easily. The demon saber only had the appearance, but its true power was far from what it looked like on the surface. With the strength of Supreme Tianyu, he should not be strong in appearance but weak in reality. The Pope immediately pushed his cane upwards. The huge demon blade could not withstand it and retreated with a rumbling sound. However, after the demon blade retreated, people discovered that Supreme Tianyu, who was hiding behind the demon blade, had disappeared without a trace. Could it be that he escaped? In the Holy City, the priests that gathered near the Holy Cathedral whispered to themselves, and then watched the first round of the fight between the two supreme powerhouses with trepidation. Although the two sides did not show their real ability, and could only be regarded as a preliminary test, it was still hair-raising. None of the priests in the Holy City believed that the Pope would lose. However, in the face of the demon blade that was even bigger than the Holy City, how could they not be afraid when they were in the holy city, in the shadow of the demon blade? Therefore, if Tianyu escaped, the fight would end here, and that would be the best. Unfortunately, how could things be that simple? How could a mad dog cultivator who dared to slaughter hundreds of thousands of people in a foreign land escape? After throwing out the demon blade to divert attention, Tianyu disappeared without a trace. The Pope was not in a hurry to pursue. Instead, he held his cane and muttered something. A moment later, an astonishing light wave spread out in a spherical shape, which, in a twinkling of an eye, spread out to hundreds of miles away. Wherever the light wave passed, people felt as if they had been seen through from the beginning to the end, and there was no longer any secret about them. Wang Lu and the others in Taobao City were also within the range of the light wave. Fortunately, the fifth elder of Spirit Sword sect was here. He pointed his emerald green bamboo sword toward the sky, and the light wave of the Pope bypassed them and didn't sweep them. Wang Lu was secretly surprised. Although the light wave just now was just casually released by the Pope, his master's sword also didn't accumulate any power. It was also casually released, yet it could easily break the spell of a legendary level Holy One, this guy. Oh, he immediately released his big move? A mad dog is indeed a mad dog, always thinking what ordinary people can't think. When Wang Lu was secretly surprised by his master's non-phase sword, Wang Wu herself put her attention on the sky and softly sighed. He immediately released his big move. Is it Tianyu? Wang Wu pointed her finger at the sky. Look at it yourself. Wang Lu looked at the sky and saw that it was still the sky with half yin and half yang. The dark clouds and the dazzling sunlight each symbolized one side, tearing each other in the sky, fighting to the death. There didn't seem to be anything special, and there was no change from before. Where's the light? I can't see the light. At this time, he heard Bai Shixian look up at the sky and exclaim. Wang Lu curiously said, "Little Bai, could it be that you've evolved from Bai Shixian to cataract?" As soon as his voice fell, his master slapped him on the back of his head. "Idiot, you have the nerve to laugh at Little Bai, it's clear that you're ignorant. Try to use your non-phase absurd power to look at it again." Wang Lu tried to circulate his magical power, which he was not particularly proficient in, into his eyes, and then looked up again. What he saw in front of him made him greatly surprised. The sky was dark, and only the billowing dark clouds vaguely showed their outlines. The sunlight that filled the sky had disappeared without a trace. In other words, the battle between yin and yang that Tianyu had seen just now was an illusion that Tianyu had deliberately set up. He had covered the sky for hundreds of miles, or even thousands of miles, just to hide the rolling black clouds in the sky. What is this? Wang Wu explained, Tianyu was originally a monster cultivator. In the past, he was enlightened by the essence of the moonlight, and then every step of his cultivation was based on the moon. The brighter and brighter the moonlight, the stronger his strength. However, the moon waxes and wanes, so how could it always be full? So, Wang Wu stopped halfway through her sentence, because there was no need to say more. The change in the sky had shown everything. As the Pope continued to release the holy light, the illusion that shrouded the sky finally collapsed. However, as the illusion disappeared, the earth was plunged into darkness. Just now, it was clearly a sunny day, but now, it was a deep night, like it was daytime. While everyone was panicking, from the rolling dark clouds, a silver light pierced through the darkness and descended to the earth. A bright moon peeked out from behind the dark clouds. The bright moonlight washed away all the filth of the mortal world, making people feel as if they were in a dreamy fairyland. In Taobao City, Wang Lu felt that it was inconceivable. Especially when he felt the familiar aura of the moonlight, he was deeply confused. Damn! It's daytime, where did the moon come from? Moreover, it's the moon of 9 regions. This familiar aura of the moonlight is not released by the moon of the Western continent. Wang Wu lightly replied from the side, of course he carries it with him. The reason why he could advance from the peak of deity stage to unity stage is because of this move, the unity of heaven and earth, the body carrying the moon. That's how he got the name Supreme Tianyu. In other words, the bright moon in the sky is Tianyu himself? Yes, because the moonlight only falls at night, so he has to cast the great day and night technique first. In order to avoid being noticed by the Pope and interrupted, he used the bewitching blade and illusion as a smokescreen. Although this mad dog is crazy, his handling of the details is worth learning. Watch carefully, this level of battle is rare. While speaking, Wang Wu's complexion gradually became dignified. At this time, the Pope's complexion in the sky above Taobao City was particularly heavy. When the heavenly moon appeared, even if he was not familiar with the characteristics of Tianyu's method, he knew that he had fallen into the opponent's plot, which delayed the time, causing the situation to be somewhat passive. However, the more this was the case, the more he couldn't be impatient. Even though he was confident that he had the advantage in strength, whether it was in the east or west continent, the characteristics of the moon were soft and changeable, good at using softness to overcome hardness. If he was not careful, the advantage in strength would be easily taken advantage of. At the same time, the 9 regions cultivators who watched the fight were also curious. At this time, Tianyu had already cast the great day and night technique and the bright moon in the sky, and his strength had climbed to the peak, allowing him to display his demon method and immortal method to his heart's content. However, the Pope also responded in an instant. He projected the sea of holy light into the world. Although it could not break the great day and night technique, it made the holy city into a sea of light. The remains of the 13 deceased holy ones in the holy cathedral resonated with the holy light. A moment later, the 13 holy ones in the sky surrounded the Pope, and their imposing manner soared to the sky. One attack and one defense, both sides had their own unique moves, which was breathtaking. In contrast, Tianyu's swordsmanship was unconventional and had a series of tricks, while the Pope used his strength to break the skillful move. Wait a minute, didn't they say it's one-on-one? What's with these 13 thugs? In the distance, some of the 9 region spectators raised their doubts. They're called beasts. Our Wanxian League's beast control sect cultivators also bring dogs when they fight. In this way, the Pope only released 13 human-shaped fierce dogs, which was in line with the rules. However, the holy light priests who were watching the fight with the 9 regions people from the side had gloomy faces. However, after a few words, they turned their attention back to the sky. Next, in the face of the power of the Pope, how would Tianyu use the great day and night technique to contend against the Pope and his 13 holy ones? People were waiting to see. Suddenly, several sharp-eyed spectators exclaimed, "Look at the sky." In the sky, the bright moon trembled slightly, like a boulder touching water, stirring up a circle of ripples. The next moment, the bright moon dived down. Chapter 357. Since ancient times, there had been too many things falling from the sky, from small fragments of meteorites to large burning meteors. There was no lack of blessings from the heavens on the earth, and many kinds of meteorite metals were essential materials for forging divine weapons. For many professions in the Western continent, the attack from the sky was not uncommon. Those high-order magicians could summon huge meteorites from the 9th heaven. After a long acceleration, a room-sized meteorite could destroy a city. Although the attack was simple and crude, it was really powerful. However, while the power was boundless, this overly simple and direct attack was often easy to be cracked. For high-order professions, there were too many ways to avoid the pure physical damage, which was twice the result with half the effort. Meteorites were mostly used to bully the weak. Then, at this moment, when people saw the full moon falling from the sky above their heads, like a demon king that could destroy the world, their hearts were stupefied. Under the great pressure, not to mention the ability to think normally, even fear, panic, and other emotions couldn't be aroused. Those in Taobao City, those who were watching the battle from dozens of miles away, and those who were watching the battle from thousands of miles away, all of them were sincerely shocked by this miracle at this moment. Falling moon. It turned out to be falling moon. There was actually such a terrifying spell in the world. Even though the moon formed by Supreme Tianyu was far less than the diameter of a real full moon, if this terrifying giant fell to the ground, not to mention a mere holy city, perhaps the entire Western continent would tremble. The land within thousands of miles around the holy city would sink, lava would erupt, and all life would be cut off. If a Supreme of Unity stage used all of his energy to destroy, he could indeed destroy all the people on the path. No one thought that such an attack could be withstood, and it was even impossible to divert the force to the side. The power was so huge that it was hard to imagine that this was a spell that belonged to a mortal. Turning oneself into a moon and falling straight down, perhaps even the legendary moon god was just like this. Moreover, how could a mortal resist the attack of a god? While everyone was dumbfounded, the Pope still maintained his calm. With a calm face, he waved his scepter, and the 13 holy ones around him turned into 13 lightning bolts and flew in different directions, disappearing from everyone's sight in a flash. Spread out? If he didn't gather his strength and fight to the death, how could he disperse his strength? Is he giving up on this round? Among the spectators, there was no lack of negative conjectures. They thought that the Pope did not want to fight head-on, lest both sides suffer. However, in the next moment, the 13 pillars of light that shot into the sky made these people realize how shallow they were. The 13 pillars of light appeared in different parts of the continent. The furthest from each other was nearly 1,000 miles away, but all of them pierced through the clouds. All of them came from the places of faith under the jurisdiction of the Church. Eternal Summer City, Rainbow Forest, Flaming Canyon, each of them was the holy land of holy light religion that had written countless legends for thousands of years. The 13 holy lands were ignited by the 13 holy ones at the same time. The accumulated holy light for thousands of years violently erupted, as if to tear the entire sky. At this moment, as the leader of the Church and the number one representative of the sea of holy light in the mortal world, how could he possibly escape? Behind him was the foundation of the Church. If he escaped, how could holy light religion have the face to command hundreds of millions of believers? Proclaim the greatness of the holy light to the people? Therefore, the Pope could only face it head-on, only by using stronger power and more overbearing means to overwhelm the opponent. And as the strongest legend in the Western continent, Pope Billy was confident that he could do it. Even though the opponent's spell had set foot in the realm of God, at this moment, backed by the pious faith of hundreds of millions of people, the Pope was confident that he could even fight against a true God. Heretic, the sea of holy light will destroy you. The Pope loudly roared, raised the scepter in his hand, and issued a command that symbolized the highest authority of the sea of holy light. Under him, the holy city of the Church suddenly burst out with astonishing energy. In the church area, the holy light was as thick as a substance, wrapping everything in it. A moment later, the holy dome of the holy cathedral was smashed, and a vortex with infinite suction force was formed. The 13 pillars of light in the distance were instantly drawn and gathered in one place. What came out was a sea of light. Sea of holy light. The Pope is summoning the real sea of holy light. In the holy city, several high-order priests inconceivably looked at the light that converged in the sky. A moment later, tears flowed down their cheeks and their knees trembled. That light carried a majesty that was difficult to look straight at. Even the Pope was as small as a speck of dust compared to it. That was a majesty that did not belong to the human world, only God could have. The belief of holy light religion was not a personified God, so the only thing that could suppress the hundreds of millions of believers was the real sea of holy light. It was not a projection summoned by the believers, but the real thing. This was also one of the few times in the history of Holy Light religion that the real Sea of Holy Light descended. Over the Holy City, the platinum light was boundless. From a height of thousands of meters, it spread upward for tens of thousands of miles, occupying a small half of the vast western continent. Moreover, it continued to expand, like a real endless sea, swallowing everything in the continent. At the same time, all the forces in the western continent were shocked. Did Holy Light religion want to take this opportunity to sweep the continent with the absolute strength of the Sea of Holy Light? However, before they could react, the falling moon of Tianyu finally broke through the clouds and came to the world, colliding head-on with the platinum Sea of Holy Light. At first, it was silent. There was no earth-shattering collapse, no landslides or tsunamis. The Sea of Holy Light gently embraced the falling moon, and the falling momentum of the full moon suddenly slowed down. Its speed from thousands of miles in the sky rapidly slowed down. This slowing momentum was silent but irreversible. Tianyu's world-shaking falling moon technique seemed unstoppable, but in the end, under the obstruction of the Sea of Holy Light, it became slower and slower. Water is the power of tolerance, and the endless vast Sea of Holy Light has the mind to tolerate everything. In the Holy City, there was a burst of cheers. The Holy Light religion believers shouted, "Long live the Pope," and celebrated the victory in advance. In their view, the omnipotent Holy Light has purified the sin, so victory was only a matter of time. However, soon, everyone heard a tearing buzz, like the precursor of an earthquake and tsunami. However, when they looked around, the mountains and rivers were as stable as ever, without any tremor. It's the space is trembling. The complexion of several high-order professions with keen perception changed as they perceived the instability of the space. They immediately realized that the head-on collision of the two powerful forces in the sky was a great burden to the entire space. And once the space collapsed, it would be a disaster for the heaven and earth. However, at this moment, who could intervene in the battle between the two of them? As the full moon struggled to break through layer by layer under the obstruction of the Sea of Holy Light, the aftermath of the energy continued to pour down to the ground, sweeping everything on the ground. Some of the weak spectators hiding in the wilderness were instantly blown away by the sweeping energy. And the general high-order professions also felt oppressive and heavy. The aftermath was already like this, so no one could get close to the main battlefield of the battle. Fortunately, the space of the western continent was, after all, more stable than people imagined. Although it continued to tremble and groan, it never really cracked. And as time went by, the situation of the battle began to tilt in favor of one side, the Pope's side. The full moon began to find it difficult to continue. Wrapped in the Sea of Holy Light, its falling momentum became slower and slower. From breaking through the clouds to nearly 100 miles from the ground, it finally almost stopped, unable to move forward even half an inch. With its unparalleled tolerance, the Sea of Holy Light resolved the momentum of the falling moon. Moreover, it seemed that it still had plenty to spare. However, this time, Supreme Tianyu could no longer have any tricks up his sleeves. The gap in strength was already clear at a glance. The Pope's stage was slightly higher than him, not to mention that he still had the holy city of Taobao and hundreds of millions of believers behind him. The holy city and the believers were no doubt a burden, but they were also a powerful help. A pope with the holy city behind him was not much different from a god. Moreover, Supreme Tianyu's bright moon in the sky could only reach a higher stage at the moment of falling, so how could it be compared with the pope? Even though the falling full moon was only a counterfeit of Tianyu's incarnation, it still seemed very oppressive. However, being quietly held in the air by the Sea of Holy Light, it seemed somewhat powerless. Good, the first round is really won. A senior archbishop heaved a long sigh of relief and withdrew his gaze from the sky. The church and the 9 regions people agreed on 3 rounds of competition, and the Pope stepped forward. Sure enough, they won a good start. However, in the second round, it was difficult for them to have a full grasp. Although the prophet had a pair of godlike eyes, he was not good at fighting. Moreover, after the Pope summoned the Sea of Holy Light, the accumulation of Holy Light religion in the past 1,000 years was almost squandered, so it could no longer provide any powerful support to the prophet. However, if they could win one of the 3 rounds, the Church would be in an invincible position. Thus, driving these 9 regions' heretics out of the Western continent was barely an acceptable result. However, just as people began to calculate the next step, a sudden change disrupted everything. Taobao City disappeared. There was no sign, no sound. Just a moment ago, Taobao City was the most important pillar for the Pope to summon the Sea of Holy Light, simultaneously absorbing the energy from the 13 holy places. The next moment, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. What disappeared was not the entire Taobao City, but the ancient Taobao City with a long history. The residents of the city, the new buildings in recent years, the Holy Light Religion Church, and so on, were all left behind, falling on the soft sand. Some of the tall buildings soon collapsed. The residents of the city looked at the sudden change around them in disbelief, finding it hard to understand. How could Taobao City disappear? Among the people present, only Wang Lu guessed that Golden King was retrieving his own treasure house. However, the timing was a bit delicate. It was difficult to say whether it was intentional by Golden King, or if Holy Light religion was really out of luck. Because just a moment after Taobao City disappeared, the Sea of Holy Light in the sky collapsed. Summoning this great existence was essentially going against the heaven's will, and it was also a great burden for a legendary-level powerhouse. The Pope was backed by the holy city of Taobao, and with the help of a long time of accumulation, he could barely do it. But once his backing disappeared. In mid-air, the old man wearing a golden red cloak and holding a scepter disappeared without a trace along with the Sea of Holy Light. Chapter 358. In the sky, the Sea of Holy Light and the Pope disappeared together, as if they had never appeared. The falling full moon also shattered with a loud bang, and countless fragments fell down like raindrops. At the core of the full moon, Supreme Tianyu, with a pale face, lightly wiped the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth, and then slowly flew backward, without saying a word. Inside and outside the battlefield, the spectators were all stunned. The sudden change just now was so fast that people couldn't even judge what was going on. Did Tianyu win, or did the Pope win? If the Pope won, why was Tianyu, this heretic devil, still alive? And if Tianyu won, with his mad dog-like temperament, how could he be so silent? Even if he was seriously injured, he would still loudly boast about his victory. While everyone was puzzled, from the 9 regions side, a person slowly flew over. He had a kind countenance and a sage-like demeanor. He was the highest person in charge of the 9 regions cultivators in the Western continent, Feng Yin. Please send out a person from your honorable religion. Feng Yin Taoist master's voice was soft and gentle, like a breeze caressing the face. However, when he opened his mouth, everyone within a radius of thousands of miles could clearly hear his voice, as if it was right next to their ears. It showed that his magical power was quite brilliant, but not as wild as Tianyu's. It was just that, while Feng Yin was in mid-air, no one from the Holy Light religion side responded for a long time. It was not until a long time later that several bishops in the Holy Cathedral opened their mouths. The result of the previous fight is not yet decided, so it's not the turn for the next person to fight. Feng Yin smiled and didn't say anything, ignoring them. Because when those bishops raised their doubts, another person stood out from the Holy Cathedral. Like the Pope, he walked slowly, but with each step, he crossed a distance of hundreds of meters. After 3 steps, he arrived in front of Feng Yin. That person was wearing a golden red cloak, a crown on his head, and a scepter in his hand. It was the Pope's attire. With his appearance, the cheers of millions of people boiled up. It was just that, the cheers abruptly stopped after a moment because people found out that the person was not Pope Billy III, but the number 2 figure of Holy Light religion, Prophet Harrington. But why would the scepter, crown, and holy robe that symbolized the authority of the Pope appear on him? Prophet Harrington and Pope Billy have been close friends for many years. From the grassroots to the peak of Holy Light religion, Prophet Harrington's contribution cannot go unnoticed. If he wanted to rebel, how could he wait until today? Then, finally, in the midst of their shock, they realized that Pope Billy III had really fallen. Fortunately, he had his best friend, Harrington, so the position of the Pope would not be empty. After inheriting the Pope's scepter and crown, Harrington's power would not be much weaker than Billy's. Good plan. In the silence, Harrington opened his mouth coldly, his eyes full of killing intent. The prophet, who had always been modest and low-key, was now boiling with anger. You predicted that the ghosts under the holy city would cause trouble at this time, so you deliberately chose today to start the battle. You calculated that the ghosts would collude with you, so you let that demon Tianyu release his killer move, using the entire continent as a hostage to force him to summon the Sea of Holy Light with the help of the Holy City. This is a series of conspiracies. You claim to fight one-on-one, but in fact, it's 2-on-1, really despicable and shameless. Upon hearing these words, everyone present suddenly understood. No wonder Tianyu didn't say anything after winning. After all, he also knew that his victory was not an honorable one. Moreover, he even borrowed the power of the Lingjian school. However, these words also confirmed that Pope Billy III had really fallen. The first battle was really won by the people of 9 regions, although this victory was indeed somewhat despicable. Despicable and shameless? If fellow Taoist Tianyu relied more or less on the power of scheming, then what about the power of faith of hundreds of millions of believers? Feng Yin didn't show any weakness. Since you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. Is your sect going to go back on your words? Prophet Harrington waved his scepter. No, I want you to know that because of your despicable and shameless actions, after the 2 battles, you will wear thorns and shackles, and kneel in front of the holy cathedral for thousands of years to repent for your sins. Feng Yin no longer talked nonsense. Let's wait and see. Harrington waved his scepter, and the surrounding space became dense and stagnant. Countless illusions hovered around the 2 of them. People vaguely saw that in the illusions, Feng Yin Taoist master's body was bathed in blood and was torn apart under the purification of the holy light. People saw that the 9 region side was completely annihilated, and several leaders were bound in shackles and kneeling in front of the holy cathedral. People saw that the Sea of Holy Light once again descended on the Western continent, and the supreme light purified all the heretics. Harrington loudly roared, "I have seen the future. That is the future of your destruction." Along with his roar, the surrounding illusions rapidly changed and finally stopped at the scene where Feng Yin was purified by the holy light. Thousands of virtual images gradually condensed, as if they wanted to turn the virtual into the real, the fake into the real. Great prophecy, this is the prophet's great prophecy. Many people in the cathedral exclaimed. Prophet Harrington had not made a serious move for many years. Now that he inherited the power of the Pope, the power of his great prophecy was several times stronger than before. Harrington's eyes seemed to be able to understand the cause and effect of this world, and with his skillful manipulation, he directly changed the fate. This was not only a legendary level method, but also close to the level of God. At this time, even if they were not familiar with the power system of the Western continent, they could still see the brilliance of it. All the cultivators of 9 regions who participated in the battle were on tenterhooks. Even Supreme Tianyu might not be able to resist this move. Although Feng Yin Taoist master was the leader of one of the 5 uniques, after all, he was just a peak deity stage cultivator. However, Feng Yin himself was not in a hurry. Facing the oppressive illusion, he just lightly waved his hand and said a few words. You're wrong. The next moment, the thousands of illusions vanished. You. Harrington, who was in mid-air, looked at Feng Yin in disbelief, and then his expression gradually turned serious. Previously, when Pope Billy fought against Supreme Tianyu, Harrington had made several prophecies before the battle, trying to gain some advantage for the Pope. However, without exception, all of them were hidden behind a layer of fog. Obviously, it was deliberately disturbed by a powerful person. And now, it seemed that the person who could disturb his prophecy was the person in front of him. You're the prophet of 9 regions? Upon hearing this, Feng Yin sighed. Prophet? I'm just an old thing who can't even distinguish the T sword from the Year sword. I can't even say that I can do the divination. The dialogue between the two of them was in their native language. Because in their realm, their words were the law, and their magical power was constantly changing, so the meaning was naturally understood. However, for many of the spectators, the dialogue between the two seemed obscure and difficult to understand. A young cultivator, who was an elder who came to watch the battle, was puzzled. What is Feng Yin Daoist master talking about? Although he has always been low-key and modest, in front of Western continent people, is it necessary to be so modest? Just kill him quickly and win the second round, like Supreme Tianyu, the faster the better. As soon as his voice fell, his master's palm fell on his head. Don't talk nonsense. Do you think that Western continent people are so easy to kill? Do you think it's easy for Supreme Tianyu to kill the Pope? For the cultivators of the elder generation who came to watch the battle, these two battles were soul-stirring. Supreme Tianyu's bright moon in the sky and the Pope's sea of holy light were already god-level means. Even the aftermath of the battle was enough to make these nascent soul and soul formation cultivators tremble. The successor of the Pope, Harrington, seemed to be weaker than Billy, but his great divination technique was also infinitely powerful. It directly obliterated the opponent from the level of cause and effect. Although it was not as brilliant as the Sea of Holy Light, its power could not be underestimated. If it was anyone else present, even Supreme Tianyu might not be able to withstand it. Only Feng Yin Daoist master, a cultivator who was famous in the Wuxia League for his stellar diffraction technique, could easily crack the opponent's cause and effect attack. No, it was not easy at all. That wave of his hand could probably extract more than half of the magical power of ordinary peak deity stage cultivators. No matter how powerful Feng Yin was, it was impossible for him to do it easily. You're very powerful. Harrington coldly said, but Holy Light religion has eliminated too many powerful opponents in the past thousands of years. Feng Yin said with a smile, powerful? You flatter me. I'm just a third-rate fortune teller. I can barely calculate 1 or 2 steps in the future. Anything further than that, I'm powerless. Regarding Feng Yin's indifferent attitude, Harrington didn't think that he was being humble and low-key, but rather a deep pride. Therefore, he decided not to talk nonsense with him anymore. He raised his scepter and once again tried to use the supreme authority of the Holy Light to command the cause and effect. However, at this time, he heard Feng Yin sigh. It's about time for this meaningless battle to end. While speaking, he raised his hand. A row of silver flying swords flew out from his wide sleeve and pierced the sky. At this time, the day and night left by Supreme Tianyu had not yet disappeared. Although the dark clouds above their head gradually dispersed, they still covered half of the sky. The row of flying swords pierced the clouds, and the sky once again became as if it was dyed with thick ink. The next moment, the flying swords burst into thousands of fragments, which dotted the thick darkness like a dazzling galaxy. This is the move of my humble sect star sword technique, please advise me. While speaking, Feng Yin pointed the sword in his right hand downwards. Then, the galaxy fell to the ground and turned into a huge silver sword that pierced straight down. Although it was with the help of the spell left by Supreme Tianyu, the power of this sword was not inferior to the bright moon in the sky. Harrington's face was extremely solemn. The target of the great prophecy spell was also locked on this huge sword. Then, he spoke in a deep voice, which resounded in all directions. In front of the holy light, the blasphemous weapon will stagnate. While speaking, the galaxy sword seemed to be slightly stagnant for a moment. My eyes can penetrate the long river of time and witness the rise and fall of all things. Around the long sword, countless illusions were generated and rotated like fragments. Finally, Harrington forcefully stopped the scepter in the air. And I have foreseen its collapse. Boom! Thousands of illusions suddenly stopped rotating and stuck to the surface of the long sword. As the prophecy spell reached the last step, the power of cause and effect broke out. The long sword groaned and finally collapsed. At the same time, Harrington's face froze before he could put on a smile. A sharp long sword was pressed against his neck. In front of him, Feng Yin tilted his head and said in a low voice, "This is the star sword techniques." Diversion. Chapter 359. Generally speaking, Feng Yin Daoist master was a man of simple character and pure moral integrity. When he was a member of the standing committee of the Wuxia League, he had always been low-key and modest. Therefore, even the 9 regions cultivators who were most looking forward to his victory did not expect that he would use this kind of tasteless trick. For a time, the battlefield was completely silent. Feng Yin Daoist master turned his head sideways, seemingly a bit embarrassed. This tasteless way to win was not his intention. It was just that when Harrington went all out to fight against the galaxy sword, his flaws were so big that he, as a practical cultivator, could not hold back. It could be seen that Harrington's actual combat experience was very shallow. He had been hiding behind Billy all his life as an advisor, giving advice and foreseeing the future. Although he had a more detached posture than Billy, it also caused him to seriously lack actual combat experience, especially in the face of a powerhouse of the same level. He inherited the power of the Pope, but he could not inherit the Pope's actual combat experience. In the face of an opponent like Feng Yin, he would lose everything in just one move. In 9 regions, a cultivator who relied on his experience to bully a newcomer was not honorable. Therefore, although Feng Yin didn't show any mercy in his victory, thinking that there was a group of onlookers not far away, he couldn't bear to lose face. Good move. Although Harrington had a sharp sword on his body, he was not in a hurry. But do you think you've won? Then cut it down. Feng Yin chuckled. I have also heard of the Holy Light religion's immortal body. When the Holy Light religion's believers reached the level of Holy Light religion, they basically had the ability to come back from the dead. Although this ability had a strong limitation, it was still a heaven-defying ability. Although Feng Yin had gained a temporary advantage, not to mention that when he launched the galaxy sword, he had consumed a lot of magical power, which was not enough for him to use his full strength. Although his sword momentum was fast, it might not be able to break Harrington's Pope's robe. Moreover, even if it was broken, the opponent could still come back from the dead. At most, he lost one move, which was not important. Feng Yin said, "It's not easy to kill you, but conversely, it's not easy for you to win against me." Harrington did not say a word. He waved his scepter with all his strength and once again touched the line of cause and effect, regardless of Feng Yin's sword on his neck. It was clear that he would rather sacrifice his life to continue fighting. Although his combat experience was lacking, his will to fight did not lose to anyone. After his friend of many years, Billy, fell, he must support the sky for Holy Light religion at all costs. However, at this time, Feng Yin withdrew his sword. Enough, there's no need to continue this fight. As he spoke, he retreated backwards. His figure drifted erratically as he nimbly moved around the myriad of karmic threads controlled by Harrington. It was as if he was dancing on the tip of a needle, nimble and swift. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to the camp of the 9 regions cultivators. Harrington of Harrington's words. Harrington, Feng Yin said, I, Feng, I, Holy Light, I, Feng, I, Sect, I, Lu, I, Feng, Feng Yin smiled and said, do you remember the conditions of our initial fight? If we win all 3 battles, please promise us 2 conditions. First, open the Golden King's treasure house and let us find what we want. Harrington coldly said, yes, but the future that I foresee is that you will be defeated in 2 battles and repent for thousands of years under the purification of the holy light. Feng Yin's smile became brighter. Since you're so good at foreseeing the future, have you ever foreseen that we have already got what we want? While speaking, he suddenly stretched out his right hand and opened his palm. A simple and unadorned block like a seal appeared in the palm of his hand. Seeing that block, Harrington slightly frowned because he could not see through it. He just faintly felt that this block seemed to be inextricably linked to the Golden King's treasure house. This is the purpose of our 9 regions cultivators coming to the Western continent. Harrington's brows wrinkled even tighter. He secretly launched his great prophecy technique. His eyes penetrated through the river of time and cause and effect. Following the block in Feng Yin's hand, he soon saw a group of young 9 regions cultivators. Holding the block, they quietly crossed the battlefield under the cover of an elder-level cultivator. Taking advantage of the fierce battle in the sky, they sneaked into the camp of 9 regions people from the ruins of Taobao City and sent the block to Feng Yin's hand with a spell. Looking back, Harrington was shocked to see that those young 9 regions cultivators actually came out from the Golden King's treasure house. And the one who led them was impressively the culprit who stirred up trouble in Bretonia, the legendary gigolo of the Night King. He was also the primary target of Faceless One, Paul, Ferdinand, and the others. At this moment, his appearance meant that the operation of Faceless One and the others had failed, and those who participated in the hunt might have fallen. What was even more fatal was that, while those 9 regions cultivators got rid of Faceless One and the others, they also got the key of 9 regions people from the treasure house. This meant that, while putting away the key of the group of immortal tombs, Feng Yin lightly said, the meaning of our victory no longer exists. Even if we win all 3 battles, you can't get the second key of the group of immortal tombs. Not to mention, I'm afraid the Golden King's treasure house is not under your control, so what's the point of gambling? Harrington was silent, but his grip on the scepter tightened. Did the 9 regions people want to just leave like that? After causing the fall of 3 holy ones of holy light religion, including the Pope himself, and destroying the King's treasure house, the biggest strategic foundation of holy light religion in the past 100 years, they just want to pat their butts and leave? Calm down, it's not good for anyone to continue fighting. Feng Yin advised, your noble religion's vitality has been damaged, so the most urgent thing is to recuperate and lick the wound. If you insist on forcing the war, perhaps we will suffer losses, but your noble religion's loss will be incalculable, and the 10,000 years old religion will fall apart and cease to exist. In your dreams. Feng Yin said, no, this is the calculated future. With that, he gently waved his hand, and a flying sword flew out like lightning. Harrington ignored this. He had the holy robe left by the Pope, so his defensive ability was quite strong. This kind of understated attack was simply not enough. Puff! A muffled sound of metal penetrating flesh was heard. Harrington felt a chill on his chest. When he looked down, he saw that Feng Yin's flying sword had penetrated his chest, leaving only the hilt and a small part of the sword stuck in his chest. The sword was engraved with a simple and unadorned 9 regions character, which seemed to be a prop used by the other party to cast the Great Change technique. However, this prop-like sword could directly penetrate the defense of the holy robe, trampling all the defensive principles and power under its feet, causing a fatal result. It was as if the heaven was destined to make it drink blood, like a karmic attack. In amazement, Harrington's body has involuntarily turned into holy light. This was the spontaneous activation of the resurrection ability of a Holy One. A moment later, the light gathered again, and his body also returned to its original state. The long sword in his chest disappeared, the wound healed, and even the broken holy robe was repaired. However, the cold pain in his chest still remained, reminding him of what had just happened. The coldness and the pain was like a freeze that made him unable to move. "Okay, let's go," Feng Yin said and beckoned the 9 regions cultivators who were watching the battle to leave. Although the cultivators were somewhat inexplicable and couldn't see what had happened, Feng Yin's Star River overflowing sword and karmic piercing flying sword had successfully shocked the audience, making them involuntarily obey his orders. When the 9 regions people left, the Holy Light religion was in an uproar. Several archbishops couldn't help but want to fly out to stop them, but they found that there seemed to be an invisible barrier in front of them. No matter what, they couldn't go forward. "That's enough, go back." Harrington's weak voice came from the sky, and then he slowly landed. His face was full of vicissitudes, and his eyebrows seemed to have aged a lot. "Why?" An archbishop could not restrain himself and asked, "Let them go just like that? Where would the face of our holy light religion be? How could we?" Harrington's voice became stern. "In the next 50 years or even 100 years, we must recuperate and must not lightly start a war. Do you think we only have one opponent, the 9 regions cultivators? Countless people in the continent are looking forward to the destruction of holy light religion. Otherwise, how could these 9 regions cultivators come here? At this time, acting on impulse is irresponsible to the thousands of years of foundation of holy light religion and the sea of holy light." The stern reprimand barely suppressed people's doubts. However, perhaps only Harrington himself knew that the reason why he didn't dare to go forward to kill them was because the other party's last sword had completely shattered his fighting spirit. The flying sword didn't look impressive, and the flying sword itself didn't have much power. However, it pierced through time and space, arriving in front of him through the karmic threads. This method didn't require any complicated techniques, and it wasn't as brilliant and all-encompassing as the Great Prophecy technique. However, it was extremely sharp, and one sword could break through all techniques. Even if he understood it, he was powerless to stop it. Perhaps if Billy the Third was here, he could suppress the opponent with fair and square strength. However, for Harrington, who was accustomed to relying on prophecy technique, Feng Yin was simply the perfect opponent to restrain him. Feng Yin could kill him once, so he could kill him a second time. If they continued to fight, it was really unnecessary. It would simply be throwing away one's life in vain. Looking at the back of the 9 regions cultivators that were constantly going away, Harrington's heart was like dead ashes, and his holy light was dim. On the other side, the 9 regions people who returned to the capital were talking about it. The mystery of Feng Yin's last sword strike was only known to the 2 parties involved. In other people's view, the beginning and the end of the fight were somewhat inexplicable. However, one thing was clear. Their purpose of crossing the endless sea to the west had been achieved. The key to open the group of immortal tombs had been taken by Feng Yin Daoist master. And the person who really achieved this goal was Wang Lu, but at this time, he was in a delicate predicament. "Wang Lu, I think it's time for us to say goodbye." Aya faintly smiled. In her green eyes, there was a complex mixture of heroic spirit and tenderness. Chapter 360. The 9 regions cultivators who returned from the Holy City in triumph never stopped talking about it along the way. Although the 2 battles at the foot of the Holy City did not last long, they were thrilling and soul-stirring. Supreme Tian Yu's Unity Stage super powerful spell, the Pope's power to summon the Sea of Holy Light, the new Pope's Great Prophecy technique to reverse the cause and effect, as well as Feng Yin Daoist Master's superior stellar diffraction technique. This was a wonderful battle that had not been seen in 9 regions for many years, which left people with endless aftertaste. The changes outside of the battle were also unexpected. How did Feng Yin Daoist Master get the key to the group of immortal tombs? Why did the king's treasure house of Holy Light religion suddenly disappear? Why did Feng Yin Daoist Master not pursue the victory? There were many mysteries in the hearts of the spectators, but unfortunately, the people who knew the inside story did not reveal even a little bit of it. Feng Yin has always been low-key, but even that mad dog Tianyu was rarely silent. No one knew if it was because he was seriously injured or because of other reasons. In addition to Feng Yin and Tianyu, the most eye-catching person in the team was the lead disciple of Lingjian School, Wang Lu. Because some people in the team with discerning eyes saw that when the battle was in full swing, they were escorted by the 5th elder of Lingjian School from the direction of Taobao City. How did they enter the interior of Taobao City? Since the mad dog Tianyu caused an all-out war between the two forces, Holy Light religion blocked Taobao City, making it very difficult for outsiders to enter, especially the cultivators of 9 regions. Moreover, according to a few people, the key in the hands of Feng Yin Daoist Master was provided by Wang Lu and the others. In other words, Wang Lu got the key one step earlier than anyone else present, which was even more puzzling. However, as the person involved, Wang Lu had no time to enjoy the feeling of being in the limelight. In front of him, Aya had already said her farewell words, and it seemed that their parting was just around the corner. All good things must come to an end. This is a sentence that I learned after crossing the 9 regions. I think this is probably the time. What you have to do in the Western continent is over, so you should soon return to 9 regions, and I will not be with you. Wang Lu opened his mouth to persuade her, but Aya was one step ahead of him. Thank you for everything you've done for me, but I can't go on with you. My home is here, on this land. I can't leave my country and people behind. Although Wang Lu had expected this day as early as a few months ago, even before he set off from Spirit Sword Mountain, listening to Aya's words at this time, he still couldn't help but have a complicated mood. You can't abandon your country and people, but can you abandon your kitchen and your repeat customers? Aya bowed her head and smiled. I'm right here. You are welcome to come to Bretonia at any time. As long as it's you, no matter how many times, I'm willing to cook for you, although I know very well that my cooking is not good. Seeing that Aya had made up her mind to leave, Wang Lu had no choice but to reveal his trump card. Do you remember the bet you made with me in the treasury? In the fight against the barbarian race god of war, I said that if I could single-handedly delay the time, you would. Aya, of course, remembered that if Wang Lu could do it, she would agree to his request. At that time, although the bet was not formal, she still treated it seriously and never thought of reneging on the debt. It was just that, Wang Lu didn't put forward any conditions at that time, so the matter was put down. When Wang Lu brought it up this time, it actually put her in a difficult position. Rest assured, I won't deliberately embarrass you. Wang Lu said and then turned to look for his master. Master, I have something to do here. You take Lioli and Little White back first. Aya and I will stay in the Western continent for a while. Wang Wu was a bit surprised. She looked at the two of them and said, not bad, are you going on a honeymoon? Just as Wang Lu was about to clarify the misunderstanding, his master took out a medicine bag from her mustard seed bag and earnestly handed it to Wang Lu. Disciple, Aya is a hard person. When you two are together, you have to take care of her and make her happy. This medicine is carefully mixed by me. No, I got it by chance. I don't have any use for it, so I give it to you. Remember to take the powder orally and apply the ointment externally. Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. Master, why did you come to the Western continent this time? Could it be that you fancy some of the black and white uncles here with big tools and a large number of people? Moreover, even this can't satisfy you, why did you bring medicine to liven things up? His master put on a "how can you wrongly accuse me" expression. You're too sad. We've been together for 10 years, yet you still don't understand your master. Everything master does is for your own good. You see, this medicine bag has your name written on it. Wang Lu turned it over and saw that it was indeed so, which made him even angrier. Just you wait, it's not like I don't know your name. While the two of them were quarreling, Aya pushed him away. No need, I want to be alone. Before she could finish her words, Wang Lu took the initiative to put his arm around her shoulder. Ha ha ha, why are we being so polite? I'm your face. Before she could finish, she realized that things were going to be bad. Sure enough, she heard her master's sinister smile behind her. Face what? Don't tell me it's the face. Wang Lu said, there are so many words that start with face. Bread, flour, face the wall, how could you think of the face first? Wang Lu righteously explained, I'm her interviewer, please show some respect. Interview what? Wang Lu turned serious. Not only to his master, but also to Aya, he said, it's about whether Aya is qualified to be the king of Bretonia or not. After bidding farewell to his master and the others, Wang Lu and Aya traveled alone on the road to Bretonia. Although there were too many things to report to the sect elders, when Wang Lu applied, his master and the sect leader very generously granted him a leave of absence. They also told him to pay attention to safety and be careful, and then kicked him away, completely letting him go. However, Wang Lu also knew that his trip to the Western continent had indeed come to an end. The next thing to do was to clean up the mess, which was to solve Aya's problem. Solving Aya's problem was not only for himself, but also for the sect. Before leaving, his master and the sect leader respectively looked for him to talk. Feng Yin Daoist master fully embodied the art of leadership. He said, Wang Lu, you are the lead disciple of Lingjian school. I've always been at ease with what you do. However, this time, we have to respect her personal wishes, understand? Wang Lu made a gesture of understanding. Adultery but not rape, I understand. After a while, his master came over and righteously said, Aya has been an inseparable member of Lingjian school since ancient times. Speak like a human being. Don't come back alone, understand? Wang Lu said, I know what you mean, it's best if the three of us come back together, right? His master smiled. Women, once they are pregnant, they will not be so stupid and stubborn. Unfortunately, she's a spirit of the brave departed, how could she be pregnant? His master's smile became thicker. Otherwise, what do you think my medicine is for? You're still young, yet you've already succeeded in cultivating non-phase method, can you really be dispirited? His master patted Wang Lu's shoulder. Young man, do a good job, I look forward to your good news. Good news? How could it be that easy? Aya's problem was not difficult, but it was not simple either. The two of them walked for a long time in silence. Wang Lu thought for a moment and then decided to ask, what exactly happened? Do you remember in the king's treasure house, before we climbed the beautiful unique pool peak, we experienced a test? Wang Lu, of course, remembered. In the legend, he was the only one who passed the test in the past tens of thousands of years. In the illusion, someone would propose an irresistible transaction or request. At that time, he faced Faceless One, and Aya, who would she face? What, did you meet your old lover? Aya froze for a moment and then couldn't help but laugh. Old lover? The person I saw was you. Wang Lu was surprised. How could it be me? In the illusion, the situation was both real and fake. Although it was an illusion, the transaction proposed by the other party was indeed feasible. Otherwise, everyone knew that it was fake, so naturally, everyone could refuse the transaction and calmly pass the test. However, at that time, Wang Lu was clearly in an independent space, so how could there be a doppelganger next to Aya? Of course it's a fake person. Aya said, but what he said at that time, I don't think it's a lie. What did he say? He said that he can help me achieve the revival of Bretonia, can help me solve the problem that I once troubled, and achieve the prosperity of the Night Path. Wang Lu nodded. Almost every sentence went straight to the G-spot. No matter how you look at it, it's me. What about his conditions? He wants me to give up the throne and return to 9 regions with him. Wang Lu was suddenly surprised and then fell into silence. Aya said, at first, I thought he was just an illusion, but soon I realized that although he is not your real body, he is no different from you. What he said is indeed what you think in your heart, are you so sure? Aya lightly said, no one should be able to imitate your characteristics. If someone can imitate it, it must be you. And then? Then, I asked him why he made such a request, but he didn't answer me. He only asked me if I agreed or not. It was really hard for me to make a decision. Until the illusion was finally broken, I couldn't give him an answer. Now that I think about it, it's really indecisiveness that shames the Night Spirit. Wang Lu asked, so now you have an answer? Actually, I'm really curious. With such a good condition, why are you hesitating? Just quickly agree. Aya said, the condition is indeed very good, but if you want me to leave Bretonia, my duty, my mission, and go back to 9 regions with you to live a carefree life, I can't do it. You don't believe that I can fulfill my promise? If it was a few months ago, I might hesitate. But now, I have no doubt that you can do anything. In fact, you have done it. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. Then, he carefully looked at Aya and was surprised to find that her spirit of the brave departed seemed to have changed a lot, which meant, yes, I have completed the oath to find the way to win the war. The recovery of Bretonia has basically been established before I left Dragon City. Aya clenched her fists as if she was feeling the power in her body. Now, although I still can't be called a living person, I don't have to worry about my spirit failing and vanishing. Congratulations. Everything is thanks to you. Before I came here, I couldn't believe that I could really do this. Aya said, the light in her eyes became more and more firm. But because of this, I can no longer safely continue to rely on your strength and sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Right now, I have no reason to slack off. Next, I must shoulder my own mission and fulfill my duties as a king. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was stunned for a long time. He sincerely admired Aya's invincible logic. Then, he subconsciously put his hand into his mustard seed bag and touched the elixir that his master gave him before he left. Sometimes, it was more convenient to use medicine. Chapter 361. Do you remember the bet we made in the king's treasure house? In the silence, Wang Lu fumbled with his mustard seed bag and asked Aya. Aya was stunned. Of course, she remembered that bet. When they fought against the military god Tanu, Wang Lu once said that he could delay the enemy's army with his own strength and win the construction time for the laborers he recruited. Then, the two of them made a bet. If Wang Lu could do it, Aya would promise him one thing. It was just that, at that time, Wang Lu didn't mention it, so she put it down. Now that it was mentioned, Aya suddenly felt embarrassed. Chivalry required her to keep her promise, but if she gave up her insistence because of such a reason, it would be too ridiculous. Fortunately, Wang Lu didn't intend to be so rude and direct. If the bet is still valid, I hope you can come with me to walk around Bretonia in plain clothes. Just consider it as an unforgettable memory for my trip to the Western continent. Aya was startled. She really didn't expect that Wang Lu would put forward such a request. Although she knew that he must have some ulterior motive behind it, when she remembered what he had done for her these past few days, this simple request was really hard for her to refuse. "Very well, as long as you don't mind this tour guide who hasn't been back for more than 100 years and can't keep up with the changes, that's good." Aya softly smiled. Thinking that in the future, she would have to part with Wang Lu, she was a bit disappointed. Wang Lu said, "Rest assured, even if you don't come back for 1,000 or 10,000 years, some things will not change. This time, it won't take up too much of your time. How about a month?" "Of course, as long as you say it, even a year is fine." Wang Lu softly said to himself, "It's just a drug, how could it take that long?" In fact, Aya was anxious to return. Being directly sent from Dragon City to the king's treasure house by Wang Lu, she was a bit dissatisfied. At that time, Bretonia had just won 2 crucial battles, which almost uprooted the local influence of Holy Light religion. The next step was to consolidate the results of the war and stabilize the political power. And as the daughter of the king of Bretonia, her role was irreplaceable. Even though for more than 100 years, the people with real political influence in Bretonia were Bedivere and many other nobles, the reputation of the Night King was still like the sun in the sky, never declining. Her appeal could speed up the process of the restoration of Bretonia, but Wang Lu just had to do it at this time. His intention was to make her give up the throne and return to the 9 regions with him. However, this was the only thing that she could not give in to. Although Aya had experienced too many ups and downs in her life, she could not give up her mission as a ruler. However, if it was Wang Lu, and if it was only for a month, then let him be. The woman thought as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The first stop of the trip was a remote mountain area, because Wang Lu said that he had seen enough of the prosperity of the big city. The scenery in the remote areas of Bretonia was actually nothing to write home about. The two of them walked in the mountains for half a day and then stopped in a village. Even in this remote small village, the great changes in Bretonia had already been reflected, and a vigorous vitality ran through it. The two of them stayed in a simple inn in the village and received very warm hospitality. According to the villagers, these past few days, the village was indeed as happy as a festival. Because a lord who once relied on the power of the church to act like a tyrant in the nearby area was not long ago beheaded by a knight from Dragon City, the dark cloud that had been hovering above people's head for many years was suddenly swept away. This matter aroused Aya's interest. After asking about it in detail, she learned that the knight who beheaded the lord was one of Bedivere's Dragon City guards, and also the new local lord. Thereupon, with the consent of Wang Lu, the two of them went to the city where the lord was located. When they arrived at the city, it was a different scene. The change of power from the old to the new was particularly obvious here. There were many traces of war in the city. Half of the most luxurious castle was destroyed, and the church next to the castle was also cut off. Obviously, the lord and the church here had resisted. In addition, the original lord's forces were purged, and many shops and workshops were destroyed or seized. The most discussed topic in the city was the rise of Dragon City and the return of the Night King. Most of the people were happy to see this, and they were full of confidence for the future. The city was full of vigor. Moreover, the spirit of chivalry was even more sought after by many people. One could see many people dressed as knights walking on the streets, and some were genuine knights who followed the Dragon City guards on patrol. Of course, there were even more people who imitated them, and there were also many opportunists. But behind the chaos, it showed that the spirit of chivalry was unprecedentedly flourishing, which made Aya overjoyed. I knew it, Bretonia is the kingdom of knights, so the spirit of chivalry will shine everywhere. Wang Lu lightly smiled. Just like the holy light shining everywhere? Aya was so excited that she didn't hear the sarcasm behind this question. Instead, she seriously nodded. It will be more prosperous than the holy light religion in the past, it definitely will. Really? Since we've seen the bright side, let's see the dark side. Wang Lu said, and then used a spell to confuse the mind of a patrolling soldier on the street. What did you do with the reactionaries? No, the church's people. The soldier replied in a daze, they were locked under the cathedral, where the Inquisition used to be. The church's people were used to judge heresy, and now it's their turn to be judged. That place can't hold too many people, right? What else? There are too many traitors of the church and its vassal churches that the underground Inquisition can't hold them all. Some are thrown into the city's prison, and many are simply killed. In any case, they've been corrupted, so they all have original sin. Original sin? Aya frowned, very dissatisfied with this explanation. Wang Lu asked, do you mean they used to bully people and do all kinds of evil? The confused soldier thought for a moment and then replied, some of them are. Although it's not clear whether they have done it or not, after all, they are the church's people, so it's not wrong to punish them. What kind of reason is that? It's ridiculous. It doesn't care about right and wrong. Aya was immediately angry, but Wang Lu stopped her. Why should we make things difficult for a soldier? Moreover, seeing is believing. Then, under the cover of spells, the two of them sneaked into the Inquisition under the cathedral. What they saw and heard made Aya's hair stand on end. Inside the Inquisition, there were countless instruments of torture. These were the proof of the Holy Light religion's rule in Bretonia. However, the knights who had replaced the Holy Light had picked up these cruel instruments of torture and used them on people one by one. Most of those being tortured were members of the church. There were bishops who held great power, and young priests. However, there was a considerable number of them who were obviously just ordinary believers. At this moment, they were cruelly nailed to the torture tools, drifting between life and death. What made Aya's hair stand on end was that some of the church's nuns were brutally abused here, and the process was unbearable. Aya's whole body trembled in anger, and then, with a swing of her sword, she beheaded several of the leaders. Blood and brains splashed all over the room. The nuns screamed incessantly, and the scene was in chaos. Wang Lu sarcastically smiled. Yo, the spirit of chivalry really shines in all directions. Aya didn't say a word, and her sword didn't return to its sheath. Wang Lu patted her on the shoulder. I'll handle the next thing, you don't have to show your face, your identity is sensitive. Aya gazed at Wang Lu for a long time, and then slowly nodded. Then, Wang Lu single-handedly swept away many guards, directly killed his way to the city lord's mansion, and then saw the new lord. And it just so happened that the lord also knew Wang Lu. The two of them had met several times in Dragon City. However, this time, there was no greeting. Wang Lu bluntly questioned what the Inquisitor had seen and heard, and the lord was shocked to hear this. He explained that he had just gained a foothold here, and there were many things waiting to be done, so he didn't pay too much attention to the details below. And when the matter was investigated further, he explained with a bitter smile that when he parachuted here, there were too few people at his disposal. At present, most of the people used to maintain the order of the city were still the same people, good and bad. When there was a change of regime, people's hearts were unstable, and it was inevitable that extreme events would occur. However, he promised that he would strengthen the management, and there would never be such a crazy case again. Wang Lu smiled without saying a word, and Aya, who was hiding behind the scenes, reluctantly accepted this explanation, and the matter could be considered to have been settled. Then, they stayed in the city for a full half a month, using Wang Lu's illusion and Aya's legendary power to perfectly hide their tracks, as if they were hiding in the city. During this period, they carefully observed the changes in the city. The new lord did not go back on his word. After that day, he comprehensively strengthened the management of the city, and several people who took the lead in breaking the law were publicly beheaded as a warning to others. However, the situation did not substantially improve. The exclusion and oppression of the remnants of the Holy Light religion was still shocking. Many of the church's legal property was plundered, and the people close to the church were subjected to unbearable bullying. Injuries occurred from time to time. Although the new lord repeatedly ordered them to restrain themselves, they were obviously unwilling. Aya's initial anger, dissatisfaction, and injustice gradually turned into doubt. How did things become like this? The new lord was not an evil person. On the contrary, after taking office, he worked day and night, but many things still quickly deviated from the development track, which made Aya very confused. Hearing that she was finally willing to ask modestly, Wang Lu earnestly explained to her, the change of regime is inevitably accompanied by the redistribution of resources. But it shouldn't be so unreasonable, it's like plundering. Reason? Whose reason? Aya sternly said, in the spirit of chivalry, justice is the basic creed. Wang Lu said, that's the spirit of chivalry, not the objective existence of the human heart. Right now, the suppression and even persecution of the holy light religion, the insatiable greed in the redistribution of benefits, are not the case of one or two people, but the driving force of a group. Aya said, yes, the objective existence of the human heart is far from perfect, but the value of the spirit of chivalry lies in that it can infect others, turning the illusory spirit into a real human heart. 100 years ago, when I fought in all directions, I did not leave behind such a mess. Are you blaming the poor new lord for not being as capable as you? Aya was speechless. Of course, she couldn't ask everyone to be able to do what she did. Moreover, even you yourself are not omnipotent. Don't forget, more than 100 years ago, the ancestors of these greedy and ignorant civilians were infected by your spirit of chivalry. Aya sneered. Your sophistry. Yes, this is sophistry, but the truth is a good truth. There are three great illusions in the world: I can kill, she is interested in me, and I can change people's heart. And you have made the third mistake. Chapter 362. Aya obviously has her own idea on how to change people's mind. Was it wrong to change people's mind? If so, then why did the world need to be enlightened? Wouldn't it be fine if they just let it be? However, let alone the Western continent, even in 9 regions, the king's way of enlightenment was an indispensable part of any ruler. Wasn't it natural to infect and enlighten people with the spirit of chivalry? However, she was not ready to debate with Wang Lu, because it was impossible for her to win, and even if she did, it would be meaningless. However, Wang Lu didn't say much. Some things were far more powerful to see with one's eyes than to say with one's mouth. This small city could not accommodate the weight of people's mind, so the next stop was Dragon City. Choosing Dragon City meant that their 1-month journey would finally come to an end. At this time, when Aya thought about it, she was both reluctant and relieved. She had already faintly understood what Wang Lu wanted to do. However, she believed that after arriving at Dragon City, the real knight of Bretonia would let him understand that the spirit of chivalry was not illusory. She believed that the former knight of the Round Table, Bedivere, would not let her down. However, after arriving at Dragon City, what she saw and heard made her feel as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Everything seemed to be a replica of that remote town. Only, the scale of things was bigger, and on the surface, it seemed to be more orderly. However, greedy people were still greedy, and decaying people were still decaying. The past order was broken, and the newly established order was clothed with the spirit of chivalry. However, what they did was not much different from holy light religion. In the past, the church suppressed all 4 sides of Bretonia, and the believers were a cut above the rest. Now, the ones who were a cut above the rest were the knights. Not long after the regime was restored, a strict class barrier was vaguely formed. There was a clear boundary between the knight class and the civilian class, and the knights were also divided into different levels. Different levels meant different benefits. High-level knights occupied the richest land, had hordes of servants, and had monstrous power. They were like overlords of a region. To some extent, the new Bretonia was better than the Holy Light religion's rule. However, in some ways, the situation was actually worse. Because in order to consolidate the regime, Holy Light religion took out the resources of other parishes to subsidize Bretonia. However, many of the newly appointed knights simply began to exploit them. The replacement of the old regime and the new redistribution of interests were inevitable. However, everything should be fair and just, which was beneficial to the country. In the past, Aya fought everywhere and did everything she could to maintain the fairness of this process. She had once generously released an opponent who posed a great threat to her, but was defeated in the end, and gave him the respect he deserved. She had once severely punished those subordinates who tried to show off their strength after a victory and wantonly plunder. She had even set an example for them. Even though she was a supreme king, she still maintained a simple life. The knight's spirit allowed her to be like a spark that set the prairie ablaze, quickly setting off a storm in Bretonia and establishing an unprecedented unified regime. Although for various reasons, the knight's kingdom fell apart shortly after it was established, she believed that the future of Bretonia had been found. At least, she and the people who accompanied her in the struggle should be very clear about this point. Why? Late at night, Aya quietly entered Bedivir's study room. The master of Dragon City, who had just finished his day's work, also the current regent of Bretonia, was startled and immediately stood up from his desk. Aya? Aya did not reveal herself, but asked in a cold voice, why? She didn't say a word, but Bedivere was very clear about where Aya's anger came from. Just now, he ended his meeting with a famous rich man in Bretonia, who promised to give him a piece of land that was once controlled by Holy Light religion, along with the people on that land. Compared to Holy Light religion, that greedy and brutal rich man would only worsen the life of the people on that land. There were many similar things. Bedivere didn't know how much Aya had seen, but he didn't intend to cover it up. After a long silence, Bedivere finally said, "Because these are necessary compromises." Compromises? Aya's voice was full of loss and puzzlement. You shouldn't be a person who easily says the word compromise. Bedivere self-deprecatingly said, isn't it? A person who has been struggling at death's door for more than 100 years under the monstrous arrogance of the church, I'm afraid he's best at compromise. Otherwise, I would have followed the late king more than 100 years ago. This time, it was Aya's turn to be silent. The spirit of chivalry requires me to stubbornly resist until the last moment, but in the end, I couldn't bear to see everything of the late king vanish into thin air. Therefore, I compromised. Moreover, I continuously compromised. I surrendered to the opponent that I shouldn't surrender to, fell in love with the woman that I shouldn't fall in love with, and gave birth to the child that I shouldn't have. Today, compromise seems to have become my instinct. Bedivere was filled with emotion. However, the next moment, he changed the subject and unexpectedly took a tough stance. But in these more than 100 years, it also made me realize that compromise is an indispensable quality for a politician. Without my compromise, there would be no Dragon City today, and there would be no Bretonia today. Aya, you are the daughter of the Night King, tell me, is my compromise wrong? Aya's voice was somewhat astringent. That was then, but now, Bedivere shook his head. It's the same, it's actually the same. Just now, although the rich man you saw is tyrannical and greedy, he has powerful influence and strength. The winter-cold city could be occupied without shedding a single drop of blood, and that's because of him. What he wanted was just a small piece of land and a few hundred laborers, but what he exchanged for was the lives of thousands of soldiers. So, what can I do? For the sake of my own scrupulously abiding by the rules, should I let my soldiers risk their lives? Benevolence is also the basic creed of chivalry. Aya said, you should try to change him, to reform him. The human heart cannot be changed. Bedivere wearily said, unless we use a spell to turn everyone into a puppet, we must admit that the human heart is not as good as we think. Aya was surprised that Bedivere would say something similar to Wang Lu's. For a time, she didn't know what to say. After a long time, Aya tried to say, "That's just because we're not strong enough." Bedivere was excited. "Not strong enough?" "Yes, I'm just an ordinary knight of the Round Table, so I'm indeed not strong enough." "But, isn't your father, the Night King, powerful enough?" "In his life, he never compromised, but what was the result? Was it because of the Holy Light religion's infiltration that people deserted you?" "How can you say that?" Aya was unprecedentedly angry. "Do you want to say that our scrupulous abiding by the rules are in vain?" Bedivere deeply looked at her, and then dejectedly said, "Of course, it's not in vain. Without the Night King's struggle, Bretonia would still be in a state of disunity, with endless infighting and being bullied. But these are two completely different things. The strength of a country lies in the strength of the people's heart. The people's heart is broken, shameless, and insatiable." However, before Aya could finish, Wang Lu patted her on the shoulder. "Enough, don't be hysterical like a literary and artistic young man." Aya glared at Wang Lu. Her legendary level pressure assaulted his face. Wang Lu's figure slightly swayed, but he didn't budge an inch. "What, are you going to wield your sword at me? Just like what you've done to the people around you?" In a split second, Aya's anger congealed, and a bone-chilling chill spread all over her body. "No, let's go back and talk." With that, Wang Lu pushed Aya and then turned around to leave. After the two of them left, Bedivere stood alone in his study. After a long time, he deeply bent down toward the direction where Aya went. "Farewell, my king. You're wrong about one thing." On the way back, Wang Lu said to Aya, "He is no longer your subordinate. In the more than 100 years of your absence, he is the pillar that truly supports the knight's spirit in Bretonia. He is the one who single-handedly controls the situation in Bretonia and reunited the country from division to division in just a few months. And you're just the daughter of the Night King. What qualification do you have to criticize him in front of him? Don't you understand the principle of respecting the old and cherishing the young?" Aya didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was speechless. Perhaps, as she said, the changes in the past 100 years were somewhat difficult for her to adapt. Perhaps Bedivere has found his way, and perhaps there is a reason for his approach, but that has deviated from the knight's spirit. Wang Lu said, "Of course, because he is no longer a knight under your command, but a ruler. And as a ruler, he is far more qualified than you. At least, in Bretonia, although the knight's spirit has been distorted, inspired by this slogan, the people's heart is indeed united, the country is indeed revived, and unprecedented prosperity is in the near future. At the same time, it will also be accompanied by unprecedented decay. That's the norm." Wang Lu said, "There are black and white in people's heart. Even the most heinous people often have a flash of humanity. Saints will also have unbearable selfishness in their heart. Complex people form a complex society. This is an objective reality and law, like the sunrise and sunset. Don't be so obsessed with cleanliness." Aya thought for a long time. It could be seen that the confusion in her heart was like a knot. Perhaps that's just because I'm not strong enough. Wang Lu was about to cry because of her stupidity. Then how strong is strong? According to the legend of the Western continent, in the era when gods walked the world, are those gods considered strong? But I've never heard of anyone who could enlighten the people and make everyone become an immortal. So, do you have to break through the legendary level, become a god, and then from the god world to the holy world, and then from the holy world to the supreme world? Only then can you come back to deal with the problem of the people's heart? Aya was somewhat confused. What are your so-called holy world and supreme world? Oh, that's the content of the expansion pack. It's too early to tell you now. But in short, don't you think it's absurd that you have to be infinitely powerful to do something like that? Aya was even more confused. So, all these years, I've been doing useless work? How could it be useless? Without you, there would be no Bretonia today, but today's Bretonia doesn't need you. Wang Lu smiled. I know you don't understand, so I will seriously explain it to you. Actually, the reason is very simple. It's just that before, you wouldn't listen, but now. Aya earnestly asked, please give me your advice. Chapter 363. Faced with Aya's sincere inquiry, Wang Lu rarely put down his usual calm expression and instead became somewhat embarrassed. In fact, it's not like I can give you pointers. I have never been omniscient and omnipotent, but it just so happens that your situation. I have personally witnessed a similar situation, so I can use it as a reference. What I say may not be right, but it should have some reference value. Aya listened carefully. Wang Lu said, right now, Bretonia does not need you. The reason is the same as when your kingdom fell apart. A country's society is a complicated whole, composed of many different people and different classes. As a ruler, you can't directly influence every single person. You have led troops to war, so you should know that no matter how wonderful a strategy is, it can only be implemented through subtle tactics. In war, it is the officers who carry out your intentions, but in governing a country, it is the bureaucrats who carry out your intentions. What you really need to face is not every person in Bretonia, but the bureaucrats closest to your class. Aya could not help but retort, people should not have such a clear distinction between superior and inferior. Wang Lu said, I know that you are the founder of the Knights of the Round Table system, and you have always advocated equality. But even in the heyday of the Knights of the Round Table, how many people were there? There are tens of thousands of qualified knights in Bretonia. How big of a table do you have to put all of them down? In the end, you only have direct contact with the 100 or so people in front of the round table. They are your right-hand men to rule this country, but you don't care about their interests. The human heart pursues benefits. The knights follow you because of their faith, but they are not gods. They cannot live by faith alone. They also have to live and enjoy. In addition, as professionals, they needed a huge amount of resources to make themselves stronger. This was the instinct of being human. Of course, I know that you are a king with an almost perfect personality, but you can't ask everyone to be like you, otherwise, there would be nothing to eat in this world. It was rare for Aya not to respond to this burden, but to silently and earnestly listen. Wang Lu continued, the knights follow you because they hope to get benefits from following you. They are eager for honor, eager to make contributions, and at the same time, eager to be treated in accordance with their achievements. Aya interrupted, I have never obstructed them from pursuing appropriate benefits, and I have never demanded that they lead an ascetic life. Yes, you didn't force it, so your regime can persist until the first unification of Bretonia. Otherwise, you can't even pull up the most basic troops. Wang Lu said, your problem is that you didn't set an example. You are the Night King, the king who stands at the peak of billions of people. If you live a poor life, what do you want the people below you to do? You, as the king, get 1,000 silver coins a month. Can those ministers get 10,000 a month? They could only grit their teeth and take out 800, 500. But it's not even enough to live. Aya laughed. Do you want me to be extravagant because of this? Wang Lu said, apart from a few exceptions, have you ever seen a ruler who is not extravagant? Those poor monarchs were either overthrown by their subordinates, or they were about to become the monarchs of a subjugated kingdom. Poor monarchs meant that the entire bureaucratic system had gone haywire. So, according to your inference, there is no virtuous king in this world? Wang Lu said, to be precise, virtuous people are not suitable to be monarchs, because the concept of morality is not applicable to different classes. At the same time, the spirit of chivalry is not suitable to guide the monarch to rule the country. Aya had actually been moved by Wang Lu a lot, but when she heard him mention the spirit of chivalry, the girl was immediately dissatisfied. Do you want to reject the spirit of chivalry? Not reject, but put the spirit of chivalry in the right position. If something is in the wrong position, even if it has no defects, it will only have the opposite effect. Just like when you make a fish head pancake to look up at the starry sky, that is a naked tragedy. Using such an example to illustrate, Aya found it slightly easier to accept. So, where do you think the position of the spirit of chivalry should be? Wang Lu said, it's very simple, put it on the altar. The spirit of chivalry emphasizes fairness, dedication, bravery, and so on. These are all good qualities, and when it comes to educating and guiding people, it is nothing more than that. But idols are idols, and reality is reality. Aya said, do you mean to deceive everyone? You say fair and just on the mouth, but in fact, you are selfish and insatiable? Deceive? Wang Lu smiled. No promise is not deceiving. As long as you don't claim that the spirit of chivalry has been fully popularized in Bretonia, and the people can use the spirit of chivalry to strictly demand all the ruling classes, it is not deceiving. It should be said that the spirit of chivalry does not exist in reality, and has already been realized. It is a goal that we need to constantly strive for. Isn't that enough to explain it? In fact, we are indeed working hard for it. Although the reality is still far from the ideal, a unified Bretonia is always closer to the ideal than a Bretonia that is exploited and broken down by the church, isn't it? Seeing Aya was silent, Wang Lu added, using the military analogy that you are good at, let's say that you now encounter an enemy that you can't defeat. Do you want to directly rush forward and fight to the death, or do you want to step by step and accumulate advantages little by little until the final decisive battle? During this period, you may win or lose, and compromise and retreat are inevitable. Aya somewhat tiredly asked, but, how long will it take to truly realize the prosperity of the spirit of chivalry? Wang Lu rhetorically asked, if I say 10 years is enough, will you believe it? I know you can't wait to see that day, but you have to clearly realize that you have already done what you can. You have created an unprecedented foundation for Bretonia, but your role will end here. Doing more is just pulling up seedlings to help them grow. Aya slightly nodded, as if she had accepted Wang Lu's suggestion. Wang Lu did not urge her and quietly accompanied her to walk in the alleys on the periphery of Dragon City. The hustle and bustle of the city was isolated by layers upon layers of high walls, creating a small tranquility. After an unknown amount of time, Aya somewhat sighed with relief and seemed to want to say something. However, at this time, a muffled cry suddenly sounded in front of them. Aya's eyes narrowed, and then her figure flickered. In a flash, she arrived at the source of the sound. Wang Lu sighed and quickly caught up with her. In a dilapidated house, he saw a young girl crying helplessly. The cause of the matter was very simple. They used to be merchants who provided Snow Mountain spring water to the church. Later, when the church was expelled, they suffered a calamity. His father and mother were judged as traitors who supported the church. Although their lives were not in danger, the family property that they had accumulated for decades was almost completely plundered. Under grief and indignation, the two made an extreme choice, leaving behind only a young daughter and a little bit of property that was barely enough for her to live. Unfortunately, the young woman was never familiar with the affairs of the world, and her parents' inheritance was quickly cheated out. Now, it was even difficult for her to survive. Wang Lu, is this kind of sin something that must be tolerated on the way forward? Wang Lu did not answer, because Aya actually did not need an answer. Wang Lu, I think there is always something I can do in this country. Perhaps, as you said, I am not suitable to be a king, but I am still a knight, and I can do what a knight should do?" Wang Lu asked, single-handedly and chivalrously. "Wandering in Bretonia, taking care of all the injustice in the world, beheading all the heartless and unjust people in the world? Relying on your identity as the Night King, or rather, the daughter of the Night King, to fight against the strict system? Aya, this is not the spirit of a knight, but a knight-errant who violates the law with martial arts. Once or twice is fine, but sooner or later, you will find that the sword in your hand is aimed at the huge country that you have established. And the knights who still have reverence for you will unknowingly stand on the opposite side of you. Do you really want to see that scene?" Aya's whole body trembled and she was extremely unwilling. "Do you want me to do nothing?" "You can do anything, as long as you can bear the consequences. From your point of view, this is the country that you have established, so you can do whatever you want to it. But I guess no matter what you do, you will not get a satisfactory result." Wang Lu helplessly said, "So, do you understand why most of the immortal cultivators in 9 regions are not too involved in the secular world? In 9 regions, there are very few cultivators above the King Pill stage who directly interfered with the affairs of the mortal world, because they couldn't afford to. The number of cultivators in 9 regions, relative to the mortal world, is already 1 in 10,000, or even less. The Wanxian League has created so many shitty things, so the mortal world could only be more chaotic by 10,000 times. A large part of the reason for the immortal cultivators to seek detachment is that the chaos of the mortal world is really unbearable. You see, I set up the Wisdom Sect, and although I am the sect leader, I am only remotely commanding it. The ones who are deeply involved in it are the several deputy sect leaders. Because the involvement is too deep, even I, a professional adventurer, would be in a mess." Aya didn't speak again. Wang Lu patted her on the shoulder and didn't say anything more. Aya was never a fool. When she became famous, she knew better than most people in the world what she wanted to do. In fact, Wang Lu didn't think that he was much better than Aya. His biggest advantage was detachment. Aya has been deeply immersed in Bretonia, unable to extricate herself. Otherwise, with her wide knowledge, she wouldn't need others to remind her about these things. And now, what should be said has been said. Next, he could only patiently wait for Aya to figure it out. Next, Wang Lu no longer stuck to Aya's side. Instead, he gave her enough time and space to think about it. Some things needed to be left alone. However, 3 days later, when Wang Lu finished his short trip and returned to the agreed inn with Aya, he found that Aya had disappeared. Standing at the door of the inn's bedroom, Wang Lu was stunned. Did she get abducted by human traffickers? With that, Wang Lu felt a burst of disappointment. He couldn't help but put down the travel souvenir in his hand, the honey wine that Aya loved to drink, which was added with a special elixir. This was the last resort that Wang Lu prepared for Aya. If this silly girl still couldn't figure it out, then he could only let her figure it out in other places. Unfortunately, things were really hard to predict. Perhaps Aya really belonged to the Western continent, so no matter what, he couldn't bring her back to 9 regions. Chapter 364. Traveling alone in the Western continent was not a happy journey. Wang Lu searched for 2 days in Dragon City, but he couldn't find any trace of Aya. The Night King seemed to have evaporated from the face of the earth, leaving no trace behind. Even with Wang Lu's strategic ability, he was helpless. Of course, considering that Aya now had legendary level power, if she deliberately wanted to hide, with Wang Lu's current strength, it was impossible for him to find her. Since he didn't want to meet her, then there was no need to force it. Wang Lu forced a smile to convince himself to accept the reality, and then silently embarked on his return journey. Because he didn't want to leave like a stray dog, Wang Lu didn't rush his journey. Along the way, he could also witness the changes in Bretonia and even the entire western continent. Bedivere was a qualified ruler. His performance was so good that it even exceeded Wang Lu's expectation. Wang Lu had long calculated that the former Knight of the Round Table, who had been dormant for 100 years, was not simple. Therefore, after the overall situation was settled, he deliberately transferred Aya away, in order to let Bedivere have a reasonable chance of ascending to the throne, cutting off the possibility of Aya ascending to the throne. Bedivere's accomplishment was very beautiful. Not only did he successfully control the overall situation in Bretonia as the regent, but he also used Aya's prestige to consolidate his own authority. His method was so beautiful that if he didn't repent every night in front of the portrait of the Night King, Wang Lu would have suspected that he was the evil mastermind behind the scenes. Bedivere's loyalty to the Night King was beyond doubt. However, as a ruler, his enthusiasm for power was not trivial. In the past 100 years, he used various extraordinary methods to continue the inheritance of the Bretonia Dragon clan and the Night King. And this 100 years of special experience was enough to change anyone. What really made Wang Lu have a whole new level of respect for Bedivere was on the 5th day after Aya's disappearance. At that time, Wang Lu casually walked on the land of Bretonia and unknowingly came to Golden Flash Town. Not surprisingly, he didn't see Aya's trace. In fact, even if he could guess Aya's whereabouts, with Aya's current strength, she could detect his approach and then perfectly hide herself. Just to reminisce the past, Wang Lu still chose the century-old shop. He was surprised to find that the girl who previously served him, Nice, was still there. Wang Lu remembered that Nis was selected to join the Dragon City Guard along with him. When Nis saw Wang Lu, she was also very surprised. She explained that she was indeed in Dragon City, but recently, she saw some things in Dragon City, which made her realize that the life in Golden Flash Town was more suitable for her. She was a Dragon City Guard, and she also appeared in the 2 decisive battles. Although she was just a bystander, she also had some meritorious service. Guard Dragon City. She also planned to leave on the same day. But because she stayed, Dragon City continent, but because she was, so she wanted to stay. She Dragon City Star City. He saw Aya, the radiant Aya that made it hard for people to look directly at her. The girl was bathed in the radiance, wearing a bright silver armor that did not lose its elegance, and holding a sword that symbolized the royal power of Bretonia, the stone sword. Her face was brimming with the majesty of a king. Wherever she went, people would worship her. In front of and behind Aya, there were hundreds of Dragon City guards neatly lined up. Seeing such Aya, Wang Lu was shocked like a stormy sea. Because he never thought that after being missing for several days, Aya actually chose to wallow in the mire with Bedivere. Otherwise, perhaps she could openly walk in the territory of Bretonia, but she shouldn't be able to mobilize the Dragon City guards around her. Could it be that she chose to cooperate with Bedivere? How could Bedivere unite? This kind of development was completely incomprehensible. But soon, Wang Lu found that there were too many doubtful points about this Aya. Although the appearance was exactly the same, and even the temperament was quite similar, but after being with Aya day and night, Wang Lu was always able to detect some differences. Especially when Aya swaggered around in Golden Flash Town and then stayed in the most luxurious inn, Wang Lu saw even more doubtful points. For example, Tisk, there's clearly something fishy about this breast size. The real one has a broad chest, okay? Moreover, if you look carefully, her height is a bit higher. She's already so old, and she's also a spirit of the brave departed, how could she possibly grow up? Moreover, how could the real Aya not have any reaction when he came within 200 steps of her? Finally, it was the belated former Archbishop Rowan who allowed Wang Lu to determine her identity. This former high-ranking member of the church, during the Battle of Dragon City, resolutely rebelled and was exposed as a member of the Priory of Zion, which finally allowed him to protect himself in the subsequent turmoil. However, he was barely able to protect himself, and no longer had his former glory. This time, he came here in a low-key manner, alone, and even the Dragon City guards ignored him. However, his appearance allowed Wang Lu to see through Aya's real situation. So that's how it is. There's no need for Faceless One to come forward. The Priory of Xian has already cooperated with Bedivere. For the Priory of Xian, this was a natural choice. Once the two cooperated, Joan of Arc, who was hidden by the Priory of Xian, would have a place to shine. The Aya before him was just a fake good, which greatly disappointed Wang Lu, but also made him admire Bedivere's means. With Joan of Arc, Aya's existence was irrelevant, because Bedivere's weakest link had been made up. As a former Knight of the Round Table, his identity was naturally weaker than Aya's. Even if Aya was just the daughter of the Night King, she was still more suitable than him to hold the political power. At the same time, his beloved woman was the Church's holy woman, which also cast a shadow over his reputation. Therefore, Bedivere could at most serve as the regent, but the king's position was hard to reach. If Aya was determined to fight against him, it would also be troublesome. Therefore, he directly used Joan of Arc. Needless to say, this marionette was the prop that he put on the stage to establish his reputation. At the same time, it also put an end to Aya's idea of using her identity to fight against him. From a political point of view, although it was not very open and aboveboard, it was absolutely effective. As for the Caliban, it was difficult for Wang Lu to distinguish whether it was real or fake. However, most of it was fake, because the real Aya could not possibly abandon her sword. And with the current state of Bretonia, it could not do anything to the legendary level Aya. Seeing Joan of Arc, Wang Lu completely lost interest in Bretonia. This included Bedivere, a man who once impressed him with his loyalty, who was also swept into the category of not worthy of his attention. All those who were obsessed with power struggles were fools. This was Wang Lu's consistent understanding. And since this land had been controlled by fools, it was no longer worthy of his attention. As for Aya, he couldn't find her anywhere. It was clear that she didn't want to see him, so why should he force her? After a few decades, when Wang Lu had reached the King Pill Yuanying in deity stage, he would revisit this place. At that time, even if he had to use force, he would make Aya take the pill. After bidding farewell to Nis and Golden Flash Town, Wang Lu no longer had any reluctance to leave. Alone, he went to the eastern part of the continent, ready to return to 9 regions. This journey took less than a week. When he arrived at the eastern part, the city master of Deep Earth City, Haddock, personally received him and arranged a special ship to send him across the endless sea. After asking in detail, Wang Lu learned that he had a very resounding reputation in the eastern city-states. It turned out that the story of him plotting to kill 2 legendary, 1 quasi-legendary, and 5 archbishops of the Holy Light religion in the king's treasure house had spread. Although there were too many coincidences, Wang Lu still became the hero of the eastern people. If not for Wang Lu's determination to leave, Sir Haddock intended to take Wang Lu on a 1-month tour of the eastern region. When he arrived at the dock, Wang Lu found that the eastern city-state's courteous reception for him, the hero, was absolutely sincere. Because there was a powerful warship covered with alchemy products and high-level arrays. Its value could not even be measured by currency units such as magic coins. Moreover, he was the only distinguished guest on this ship. At the door of the luxuriously decorated bedroom, 2 rows of beautiful and sexy maids were respectfully waiting for him. The expression on their faces was moving and wooden, as if they were waiting for his order or pleasure at any time. However, Wang Lu was not in the mood for pleasure. He walked straight past the maids, pushed open the bedroom door, and casually threw his luggage aside. Then, he was scared by the person behind the door and took 3 steps back. Aya. The person behind the door was Aya, wearing a simple but dignified dress. She sat upright at the desk in the middle of the bedroom with a gentle smile on her face. "Wait a minute, you're not Aya, you're Jean d'Arc?" From the subtle difference between the woman's eyebrows and the obviously different curve of her chest, Wang Lu recognized the other party's true identity. However, at this meeting, Wang Lu's mood was very bad, because the pleasant surprise that had just welled up in his heart was quickly replaced by a sense of loss. And between the ups and downs, he really could not find any pleasure. "Bedivere, are you out of your mind? Isn't it good to be the king of Bretonia? Why do you have to provoke me? Believe it or not, I'll go back and use 3 months to make your regime collapse." For a cultivator who was not even a king pill level cultivator to say such generous words, it was usually just a joke. However, if this joke was said by Wang Lu, perhaps Bedivere himself wouldn't be able to laugh. However, Jean actually smiled. "I haven't seen you for a few days, you really don't recognize me?" How could Wang Lu have a good face toward this kind of puppet? "I don't look at the face, I only look at the chest. Why don't you show me your chest?" The next moment, a cold aura filled the air, causing Wang Lu to tremble. Then, a thought flashed through his mind. F***ck me, dead chef, it's really you. I haven't seen you for a long time, so you went to get breast implants. The woman in front of him helplessly sighed. "Think again." Wang Lu calmed down, carefully looked at the other party again, and then curiously asked, "Is this the fusion of your body and soul? Did you snatch Bedivere's trump card for your own use?" "It's mine, why would I snatch it?" Aya shook her head. "I just had an open and honest talk with him, and then made a deal." "Deal?" Wang Lu curiously repeated, because in his impression, Aya was a person who would never compromise in the name of a deal. Aya said, "I took back this body, and from then on, I laid the foundation of his rule." Laid the foundation of his rule? A flash of inspiration flashed through Wang Lu's mind. He incredulously asked, "You left the Caliban sword to him?" Aya smiled. Interestingly, he actually managed to pick up the sword in the stone. Then, her smile turned a bit bitter. Perhaps in the Caliban sword's view, he is more suitable to be the king of Bretonia. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was surprised. "That Jean that I saw in Golden Flash Town that day, could it be?" Aya nodded. "It's Bedivere's incarnation. He's a high-order profession, so it's not difficult for him to transform his body. Moreover, he has the most professional makeup artist around him, so the acting is almost flawless." Remembering that day when his eyes repeatedly lingered on the other party's chest, Wang Lu only felt that his vision was blurred for a moment. After a long time, Wang Lu finally recovered. "What about you? As a knight, are you really going to hand over your sword to others?" Aya said, "The Caliban sword is no longer my sword. I have found a more suitable sword." With that, she slowly stood up, pulled Wang Lu's hand, and then, before he could react, gently hugged him. "I've already found my Excalibur." Epilogue: Eat as much as you can. Being hugged by Aya, Wang Lu was stiff for a quarter of an hour. It was not until Aya let go of him with a blushing face that Wang Lu shook his head, opened his mouth, and then froze for a long time before he said, "The feeling of my chest is really different from before." The cold breath made Wang Lu feel a great danger. Therefore, he changed the subject. "Joan of Arc, you look different from your spirit of the brave." Aya said, "When I pulled out the Caliban sword, I got the blessing of the Dragon Clan. Since then, I will not age, nor grow up. But at that time, I was only 14 years old. When I turned into a spirit of the brave, my body no longer enjoyed the power of blessing. During the time when I was out, I gained some growth, and that's how I am now." Wang Lu sighed with emotion. "In other words, your original body is not a congenital disability? It's just a lack of growth? You really can't judge a book by its cover. Aya suddenly felt a trace of remorse for her behavior of throwing away the Caliban sword. In short, are you going to repent, make up your mind to abandon your fantasy, and become a hands-off shopkeeper? Hands-off shopkeeper? Aya faintly smiled. These days, I've been to a lot of places in Bretonia and met a lot of people. In a village, I saw a little boy and a little girl. The two of them are childhood sweethearts. However, the boy is a descendant of a knight, while the little girl is an orphan who grew up in the church. After the withdrawal of Holy Light religion, the two of them experienced an earth-shattering impact. The little girl almost faced a disaster. But at this moment, the boy, who has always been regarded as a promising future, insisted on standing in front of the little girl, not hesitating to shelter her from the wind and rain. The little girl asked him why, and he said that he is a knight, and his dream is to become the Night King. Although this dream is really very immature, seeing him, I realized that the true spirit of chivalry will never die. Wang Lu smiled and asked, perhaps that child is just a few examples. Aya pointed to herself. Few examples? Am I not one of them? When the country was torn apart, I, who was willing to stand up, was just a few examples. After a pause, Aya seriously said, moreover, I don't think I really left Bretonia. No matter when I close my eyes, I seem to be able to hear the call of the people in Bretonia. Wang Lu imagined it for a moment and felt that it was quite creepy. Because how many couples would suddenly call out his name when they were having sex? Wouldn't that be terrible? However, since Aya was enjoying it, he just let her be. In short, no matter what she thought, her willingness to go back was more important than anything else. In Bretonia, I have done everything that I can do. However, in 9 regions, there are still some things that I haven't finished yet. I thought that I would never have the chance to set foot on the land of 9 regions again, but... Aya said with some sadness and some nostalgia, after boarding this ship, I feel like I'm going home. However, after saying this, Aya cheered up. Since I'm going back to 9 regions, then I'll resume my old business. What? Wang Lu was surprised. Did this child really want to retaliate against the society after losing the throne? Aya said, when I returned to Bretonia this time, I seriously consulted several court chefs and improved my skills, so you can rest assured. It's because you're the court chefs of Bretonia that I'm not at ease. However, in the face of Aya's painstaking work, did Wang Lu have any other choice? Aya confidently smiled as she left the bedroom. After a while, she brought out a meticulously prepared dish. This time, Aya's culinary skills seemed to have improved. On the plate, there was a roasted chicken with golden yellow skin, exuding the fragrance of meat and wine. Wine roasted chicken, do you want to try it? Wang Lu tried a piece and felt that it was fragrant and smooth, which was actually a rare delicacy. Of course, there was still a gap compared to the real court chefs, but compared with her previous dark cuisine, it was really like heaven and earth. It must be said that the taste of this wine-roasted chicken seemed to be a bit wrong. Really? Aya was somewhat surprised as she tasted a piece. It's true, it's not the same as the one I used when I was practicing. It's strange, I'm still using the top-grade mead you brought, the quality should be better than the one I used before. Wang Lu only felt an explosion in his mind. What kind of wine did you say? It's the mead you brought. How did the wine end up in your hands? Wang Lu quickly went to the door and searched for the bag he threw at the door. Sure enough, the mead inside was gone. In order to ensure the effectiveness of the fortified mead, once it was fortified, it could not be casually put back into the mustard seed bag. Therefore, unexpectedly, it was taken away by Aya. You didn't put it in the mustard seed bag. I saw the bottle cap was open, so I smelled it and found that it could still be used. Speaking to this, Aya was somewhat worried. Could it be that it can't be used? Wang Lu took a deep breath, calmed his mood, and then revealed a smile. There's nothing that can't be used. I just want to say, let's finish this roasted chicken. Chapter 365. The long sea journey was like a boundless dream. When he woke up, the silhouette of the 9 regions was already in sight. Standing on the side of the ship, Wang Lu felt that the half a month of crossing the endless sea seemed long, but it seemed to pass in the blink of an eye, which made his heart somewhat reluctant. Of course, if he really had to drift on the sea for another half a month, that would be unbearable. The condition of the ship was impeccable. It had the best hull design, the most exquisite decoration, the cabin was filled with Western continent luxury goods, more than 20 charming and affectionate maids, and the rest of the gold, silver, and jewelry. Such extravagant treatment could not be enjoyed by the king of a country in the Western continent. Wang Lu really enjoyed the treatment of a hero in the eastern city-states. It was unbearable. The food on the ship was too miserable, and no matter how he thought about it, this was a Western continent monster. It was not the ghost chef Aya's fault. She confidently said that she would cook during the voyage. However, after the first day's roast chicken, Aya had no other dishes. In fact, she only learned that one dish, and after the mead was used up, she couldn't make a second roast chicken. It was purely because after Aya succeeded in making roast chicken, she thought that she had comprehended the essence of cooking, and that she was overconfident. However, when Wang Lu didn't check, the next day, he saw the look up at the starry sky improved a, look up at the starry sky improved 2, and other unknown substances, which was simply an eye-opener. Wang Lu repeatedly praised that Aya should not be a knight, but a national alchemist. If she was given a kitchen and enough ingredients, sooner or later, she would be able to synthesize the philosopher's stone. In this regard, Aya was deeply frustrated, but how could she be dispirited by this little setback? On the contrary, she was inspired and courageously moved forward. For Wang Lu, on the 3rd day, the situation became more and more serious. After several failed attempts, Aya simply began to use trial and error to find the feeling of cooking. After wasting half of the stored ingredients in the cabin, her alchemy improved once again, and she was only a few steps away from mastering the human body. Unable to bear it any longer, Wang Lu used his chopsticks to draw a 3-inch sword defense, isolating the dozens of unknown substances that Aya served, and angrily rebuked, "Aya, if you have the ability, have a taste and see what the hell is this? Your ingredients are not precise, your seasoning is immoral, your control of the fire is not good, and you have no strength in turning the ladle. If you don't have any skills, do you think you're worthy of wasting the best ingredients on the ship? You must be daydreaming." Aya was indifferent and did not speak, but the determination in her eyes did not retreat. Therefore, Wang Lu's tragedy could only continue. It stood to reason that in this kind of situation, the worst that could happen was to replace someone else. The 20 maids on the ship were not only charming and affectionate, but also good at cooking. Any one of them, even if they closed their eyes to cook, would be 10,000 times more reliable than Aya. However, Wang Lu could not be replaced. Because Aya's return to 9 regions was basically proposed by him. And for Aya, she gave up her Night King identity and the sword in the stone to accompany Wang Lu back. For a woman to do this for you, what was the big deal about eating a few of her great sage stones? Fortunately, Wang Lu finally found a way to survive. Because even if Aya had 1,000 faults, at least there was one thing that was reliable: her knife skill was absolutely at the Grandmaster level. Of course, this was also nonsense. How could a legendary-level swordsman's skill in wielding a knife and wielding a spear be bad? Therefore, Wang Lu simply changed the recipe to sashimi feast. In addition to all kinds of fresh fish sashimi, other ingredients on the ship could also be made into sashimi, such as ham sashimi, sausage sashimi, pumpkin sashimi, broccoli sashimi, and bread sashimi, which gave Wang Lu a way to survive. However, the days of eating sashimi every day were really bitter for Wang Lu, so when he saw the land, the silhouette of 9 regions was like a pot of fragrant streaky pork. Even if there was a small problem with the route, which deviated from the proper direction and didn't see the harbor, Wang Lu was still full of joy. In any case, for someone like him who was close to King Pil, it was not so important whether there was a harbor or not. As the ship continued to approach, Wang Lu seemed to smell the aroma of meat. Moreover, it was roasted dog meat with just the right amount of heat. A moment later, Wang Lu, who was standing on the side of the ship, was taken aback. Because he had already seen that on the beach, there was a plainly dressed woman who was boldly fiddling with a pot. Inside the pot, large pieces of meat were bubbling with a tempting aroma. It was a pot of braised dog meat. And that woman was impressively Zen Master Guru, Xiaoqi. Although he whispered to himself, Xiaoqi, who was several miles away, looked up and smiled at him. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You're finally here." With that, her figure moved, and together with the pot, she boarded the ship. Her speed was so fast that it made people click their tongues. "Although you're not early, you've come at the right time. I've been waiting for you on this beach for half a month. I just caught a black dog and cooked it, and then you came. Since you're here, let's eat together. After eating, we'll go back together. Your master is going crazy waiting for you." As Xiaoqi spoke, she put the pot on the deck. Behind her, her hand took out a pile of bowls, plates, and chopsticks from her mustard seed bag. Other than giving a set to Wang Lu, she also handed them to Aya, who was standing silently behind Wang Lu. "Aya? I've heard of you for a long time. This is the first time we've met. Do you want to try my cooking?" Aya was stunned for a moment. She frowned and actually waved her hand to refuse. With Aya's temperament, she rarely behaved noble and elegant. In Wang Lu's view, this refusal was purely because they were in the same trade. Compared to her alchemical products, this pot of dog meat was enough to subvert her worldview and explode her obviously distorted cognitive world. Xiaoqi didn't care. He picked up his own bowl and chopsticks and began to eat the meat. While eating, he said to Wang Lu, "In view of the fact that the two of us snatched the food a bit fast, I'll make it short. Previously in the Western continent, you asked for an indefinite length of marriage leave. Your sex elders sympathized with your hard work in the Western continent, so they allowed it. However, as you can guess, after this trip to the Western continent, things will pile up like a mountain. Moreover, your role in the Western continent is by no means dispensable. Therefore, there are a lot of things that you need to participate in. If you drag it for 10 days or half a month, that's fine. But if you drag it for a month, the people in 9 regions will inevitably become impatient. Right now, there are a lot of people waiting for you at the place where your ship may dock. You're lucky to meet me, so we can eat a pot of dog meat." Xiaoqi said, put away the pot that he and Wang Lu had already divided, stood up and said, "Then let's get ready to go. I'm afraid it's about time." Wang Lu curiously asked, "What about time? Moreover, what about my ship?" "Don't worry, you won't be lost. Later, the Wanxian League will send someone to help you put it away. In short, you just need to come with me." While speaking, Xiaoqi has already buckled Wang Lu's wrist. However, at the same time, her wrist was also buckled by Aya. Seeing Aya's serious face, Wang Lu was afraid that she misunderstood something, so he explained, "This is my master's friend. I don't have an affair with her." Inwardly, she thought, even if I have an affair with Xiaoqi, you don't have to watch over me like this, right? Aren't you, this ghost chef, a bit too broad? However, Aya ignored him. Her eyes kept wandering around Xiaoqi's body, and she became more and more suspicious. "You? Could it be that you are?" Before she could finish, Xiaoqi has already said, this poor monk is dog meat. This is the first time we meet. See you later. With that, her figure moved and disappeared without a trace, bringing Wang Lu along with her. Aya was slightly stunned. Although with her strength, she could completely stop them, she didn't do so. After a while, Aya couldn't help but laugh. So that's how it is, it's you. At the same time, Wang Lu only felt a blur in front of him. He didn't know how far he had been dragged by Zen Master Guru to a noisy place. When he looked around, he was immediately surprised. What is this place? Why are there so many people? A large number of people wasn't scary. What was scary was that almost all of them were famous people, not common people. The great elder of Kunlun sect, the 10,000 art sect's abbot, the Xingjing sect's inspector. Any one of them had a resounding reputation, similar to the Spirit Sword sect's Heavenly Sword Hall elder. And at this time, Wang Lu could see hundreds of them. So many people, at this time, gathered on a wide grassland, which seemed to be crowded. And in the sky, there were 5 floating golden platforms, looking down from above, majestic. After observing for a while, Wang Lu finally remembered this place and, incidentally, cleared up everything. Southern Heaven region? The group of immortal tombs? Are they going to King open the immortal tombs? The opening ceremony is being held? That's why this place is a gathering of heroes? And then I, as the biggest hero of the Western expedition, should speak on the stage? People can't find me, but they can't just postpone the opening ceremony because of a disciple who hasn't reached the level of King Pill. So many people are very anxious, right? Xiao Qi clapped his hands from the side and said with a smile, being with you saves me the effort to explain. Now that you know, then you. Before his voice fell, an elder suddenly appeared in front of Wang Lu and grabbed his hand. It's finally here. If not, your speech would have been taken by Xingjing sect's disciple. Wang Lu was in a trance that he didn't even see the elder's face before he was grabbed by him. Fortunately, from the voice, he could still recognize that it was his third uncle, Fang He. Being grabbed by Fang He, Wang Lu's vision blurred, and then he was already in midair. Clouds and mist curled up under his feet, and before his eyes, the bright golden platform had been transferred to the golden platform in the sky. There were still a lot of people on the golden platform, and their weight was obviously higher than that of the elders below the platform. Wang Lu's eyes swept across them, and his breathing paused for a moment. The leaders of the 5 super sects of the Wanxian League were all here. The leader of Lingjian School, Feng Yin, Xingjing sect's He Tu, 10,000 art sect's Tian Luan, Kunlun sect's Juri, and Royal Soldier sect's War God Kuchin. Among them, Kuchin of Royal Soldier sect was the most unfamiliar. He wore heavy armor and an airtight mask, which didn't reveal his true face. In fact, even his portrait was covered in a mask, which made him look very mysterious. In fact, since the fall of the previous leader of Royal Soldier sect, unparalleled god of war, this sect, which was scolded as a mad dog by many people, had been low-key for decades. Probably only the opening of the group of immortal tombs could lead them to appear. When Wang Lu observed the crowd, he also became the focus of everyone's attention. What he did in the Western continent was known by all the high-level people present. Toward this mysterious lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, several Supremes of Unity stage cast their attention on him. The invisible pressure brought by these invisible eyes was enough to shock the ordinary Daoist Master King Pill. However, Wang Lu didn't seem to be aware of it. Because beside Wang Lu, the woman in white with a ponytail pressed her hand on the emerald green bamboo sword at her waist, sheltering her disciple from the wind and rain. At the same time, the voice of Feng Yin Daoist Master sounded, "Okay, our lead disciple Wang Lu has arrived in time. Should the agenda be restored to the original and Wang Lu will make the third speech?" As he spoke, his eyes looked directly at the Daoist in the middle of the golden platform, which was also the most important person here, Supreme He Tuesday. He too was silent for a moment, nodded his head, and then waved his hand toward the side of the golden platform. A woman who had been sitting cross-legged stood up and respectfully retreated. That woman was a disciple of Xinjing sect and the original speaker to replace Wang Lu. Although no one knew what she did in the Western continent, for her to be qualified to replace Wang Lu's speech, it was obvious that she also had amazing achievements. Unfortunately, her shining opportunity was robbed by Wang Lu, just like a bride who was humiliated and miserable. However, the woman's eyebrows were indifferent. When she got up, she looked back and smiled, like a spring breeze. "That's Qianghua," Wang Wu timely introduced, the lead disciple of Xinjing sect. Chapter 366. Qianghua. Upon hearing this name, Wang Lu felt like it was like a thunderclap reverberating in his ears. In 9 regions, there might be people who didn't know about Lingjian school, but there were not many people who didn't know about Qianghua. As the lead disciple of Xinjing sect, Qianghua had been dazzling ever since her debut. Everyone's eyes were focused on her. Not only because she was the last disciple of Hichu Daoren, but also a strong competitor for the next sect leader of Xinjing sect, but also because she was as beautiful as a fairy, devastatingly beautiful. In any place, beautiful women were more likely to catch people's eyes, not to mention a beautiful woman with a promising future and superb immortal method. Originally, Lu Li and Zhu Shiyao from Lingjian school and Zhou Mumu from Kunlun sect all had similar characteristics. However, compared to Qianghua, each of them had their own defects. Zhu Shiyao was unreasonable, losing her indifference. Lu Li was naive, losing her childishness. Zhou Mumu was outspoken, losing her impatience. Each of them had their own defects. Qianghua, on the other hand, was mellow and free, perfect and flawless. In any point, she was not the most outstanding. She never had the amazing record of killing the 12 blood cloud demons when she was still in the foundation establishment stage like Lu Li. Like Wang Lu, who repeatedly fought against the senior cultivators, cleverly used all the resources, and regarded the stage gap as nothing, she also never created a miracle. Zhu Shiyao was known to be invincible in the same stage, so she didn't dare to say that she could win. However, step by step, after nearly 20 years of cultivation, she had steadily stood on the stage of Daoist Master of King Pill. Yes, Qianghua was already a Daoist Master of King Pill, which Wang Lu realized the moment he locked eyes with her. The threshold between the King Pill and the non-King Pill could be deep or shallow. For many mediocre people, achieving the King Pill was nothing more than advancing one level of magical power, nothing to worry about. However, for a few people, the stage before and after King Pill was completely different, and the gap between people before and after this threshold was even greater. When Wang Lu was in the Grand Cloud Mountain, he dared to take 1 or 2 moves from Tiger King of Yuanying stage. However, even if he had the strength of Peak Shoot on stage, he didn't dare to say that his non-phase sword defense would be foolproof in front of Qianghua. For Qianghua to achieve the King Pill in 20 years, he didn't dare to say that it was unprecedented, but the speed was still amazingly fast. What was more frightening was that her foundation was solid. Once she succeeded in the King Pill, she would be reborn. In the past, people estimated that Qianghua's added value according to Wang Lu's method of adding value was about 14 or 15, which was close to Lu Li. However, now, Lu Li, who hadn't passed the King Pill test, no longer had the qualification to compete with her. In addition, what Wang Lu cared about the most was that pair of eyes that seemed to be able to speak. At her master's request, Qianghua got up and left. Her eyes only met with Wang Lu's for a moment, but Wang Lu seemed to hear Qianghua's gentle voice in his ear. "I've long heard of your reputation. Today, I finally know that your reputation is not in vain." I'm looking forward to your report. Her courteous attitude greatly changed Wang Lu's impression of Qianghua. Before this, he had never met Qianghua, but he had long heard of her reputation. People said that she was modest and courteous, gentle and elegant, like a flower on a high mountain. However, according to the news and public opinion, especially the usual practice of Xinjing sect, Wang Lu automatically analyzed her as being pretentious and sanctimonious. However, at this time, he found out that his previous thinking was biased. Qianghua, this person, seemed to have her own way of doing things. She was not the exquisite packaging product of Xinjing sect's huge propaganda organization. However, Wang Lu didn't have the time to consider Qianghua. At this time, on the golden platform, the sect leaders had taken their seats one by one. He Tu, Zhuri, Tianluan, Kuqin, and Feng Yin were all sitting on the golden platform in the middle. On both sides were the leaders of Wanxiang, Flowing Cloud, and other top-rank sections. As for the lead disciples of the sects like Zhan Zai and Zhou Mumu, they usually only had to wait behind their sect's elders and had no qualification to sit. However, under the guidance of his uncle Fang He and Master Wang Wu, Wang Lu took his seat on the left side of the golden platform. According to the order, it was actually second only to the sect leaders of the 5 uniques. As Wang Lu sat down, his master quietly explained everything to him from behind. That day, after the sect leader got the key from Wang Lu, he immediately returned to 9 regions. After that, the excavation management and the Wanxian League conducted a comprehensive inspection of the key to ensure that nothing went wrong, and on the other hand, they prepared for today's ceremony. For this group of immortal tombs, the excavation management and even the entire Wanxian League worked hard for several years without any results. Now that they finally saw the dawn of victory, they were overjoyed. The scale of the ceremony was comparable to the Wanxian League's 10,000 Immortals meeting, which was held once in decades. There were 3 main items on the agenda of the ceremony. The first was the speech by the leader of the Wanxian League, Supreme He Tu, followed by the speech by the director of the excavation management, Feng Yin. Considering the identity of these 2 people, their speech was an essential procedure. The third item was more surprising. The Wanxian League actually arranged for Wang Lu to give a speech as the recipient of the Outstanding Contribution Award. Actually, there's nothing surprising about it. Wang Wu, who was standing behind her disciple, said rather mockingly, "Think about it carefully, what have these people from the Wanxian League and the excavation management done in the past few months? They spent a huge amount of money to cross the ocean, not for trade nor for colonization, but for the key to the group of immortal tombs. However, in addition to killing the local natives in the Western continent, causing both sides to suffer, have they ever achieved any practical and effective results? You saw Golden King, and you took the key. From the beginning to the end, it has nothing to do with them. If you didn't stay in the Western continent for another month, giving the Wanxian League and the excavation management more or less time to paint their faces, this whole action would simply be a farce. This opening ceremony should summarize the achievements of the past few months and even the past few years, but without you, what else could they summarize? To summarize how bloated and incompetent their own bureaucracy is? Ha ha ha, if that's the case, then it's true that they can't do without me. But, this is strange. Since my importance is so irreplaceable, what kind of ability does Qianghua have that she could be my substitute and sit here? Her. Apart from you, she is the biggest contributor to the excavation management's Western expedition. Do you remember the situation that I told you before? When sect leader Senior Brother went to the Knowledge City alone to look for clues about the key to the group of immortal tombs, it was not only to get rid of Tianyu, but also because Senior Brother really needed strong evidence to prove that the key to the group of immortal tombs is in the king's treasure house. As the person in charge of the excavation management, he was actually suffering from the bloated bureaucracy, so he could not act arbitrarily like you. Any decision must have sufficient basis. Even if on the second day after he set foot in the Western continent, he already had 60 to 70% certainty that the key was in the treasure house, he still had to look for clues. However, with his IQ and foreign language ability, in an environment where there was no language barrier, looking for clues in thousands of libraries was more difficult than looking for a wife. At that time, it was Qianghua who helped him that he was finally able to synthesize the clues from thousands of documents. Wang Lu said in surprise, "Qianghua." "Yes, it's Qianghua." She went alone and entered the knowledge city earlier than anyone else to start the investigation. In addition to locating the key to the group of immortal tombs, she also helped to sort out the information of the several holy ones of Holy Light religion, analyzing their weaknesses from countless clues. Mad Dog Tianyu and sect leader Senior Brother were able to suppress the legendary holy ones of Holy Light religion, and the information that Qianghua sorted out is indispensable. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Unexpectedly, she's actually an academic talent. You really can't judge a book by its cover. I thought that she, that kind of high mountain flower, was most suitable to play the role of **** or something like that. Well, let's put aside Xionghua's problem for the time being. The point is, you arranged me to speak without my consent, but I haven't. Before he could finish his words, Wang Wu handed him a thick draft of the speech. You don't need to prepare it. Just read it according to this, don't miss a single word. Wang Wu lightly said, "Don't worry, this is the result of 3 days and 3 nights of painstaking effort by the drafting team set up by the excavation management." Before transcribing it, they also specially proofread it 3 times, ensuring that every word is carefully chosen, every word is a gem. The more Wang Lu listened, the more mysterious he felt. However, before he could open it to take a closer look, a soft but irresistible force spread out not far from him. Like a spring breeze, it powerfully attracted his attention from the draft in his hand. Fellow Taoists, the opening ceremony of the group of immortal tombs officially begins now. The one who spoke was Feng Yin Taoist master, who was on the left side of the golden platform, who was also the host of the ceremony. The voice of the sect leader of Lingjian school was neither fast nor slow, flat and light. However, the moment he opened his mouth, the slightly noisy grassland suddenly became silent. Everyone restrained their voice and focused on one thing. Thousands of pairs of eyes gathered on the golden platform, waiting for Feng Yin Taoist master's next words with a pious posture. Of course, behind this pious posture, no one knew how many people secretly cursed the despicable and shameless bureaucrats of the Wanxian League. This kind of attention-grabbing spell, which forced people to listen carefully, was the product of thousands of years of bureaucratic culture of the Wanxian League. Its origin was no longer reliable, and for thousands of years, people gnashed their teeth in hatred. However, it was still tenacious. Whenever an important leader gave a speech, this spell would be used, which forced the people below to not even be able to doze off. Fortunately, Feng Yin Taoist master's opening remarks were very short. After 2 or 3 sentences, he entered the first agenda item. Next, the Wanxian League's leader, Hichu Daoran, will give a speech. During the short period of time, the spell was lifted. Wang Lu didn't want to waste time, so he lowered his head to look at the draft. At first glance, he couldn't wait to slap the table and stand up. Because at first glance, Wang Lu saw that the title of his speech was actually, "Report on the Task of Searching for Things in the Western Continent." The first sentence under the title was, "In order to thoroughly implement the spirit of the 107th General Assembly of the Wanxian League, earnestly do a good job in the excavation and management of the group of immortal tombs, and earnestly look for the key to open the group of immortal tombs. Our team is closely united around the Excavation Management Committee with Feng Yin Taoist Master as the core. We firmly grasp the key points of the work determined in the first working meeting of the Excavation Management Committee, and earnestly carry out the work. Now the relevant situation is reported as follows. First, careful preparation and thorough deployment. What the F***ck is this? Wang Lu couldn't wait to burn the book on the spot. Unfortunately, just as he was about to flip out, Hichu Daoran opened his mouth. Filled with anger, he could only endure it. Chapter 367. In short, in the new stage, the excavation management, with the support of the Wuxia League, will persist in hard work, persist in pioneering and innovating, and make due contributions to the development of the immortal path. As Feng Yin Daoist master finished reading the last word, there was a burst of thunderous applause under the golden platform. Of course, it was not because of how wonderful the speech of Feng Yin Daoist master was, but because the torturous speech of the leader finally came to an end, which made people feel relieved. Listening to the boring report while being unable to divert their attention because of the spell, this feeling was no different from being raped. Fortunately, Feng Yin Daoist master was considerate of everyone, so the full text of the report was very simple. At least, compared to Hichu Daoran who read the report for 6 hours, it was particularly kind. When people felt relieved, they remembered the report of Hichu Daoran not long ago, which made them feel a lingering fear. As a matter of fact, Hichu Daoran was not the kind of bureaucratic cultivator who rejoiced in grandiose achievements. As the highest cultivator in 9 regions, his interest in immortal cultivation was far greater than power, whether it was the power of the mortal world or the power of the Wuxia League. However, at the same time, Hichu Daoran was also an incredibly upright person, and his sense of responsibility was strong enough to make the vast majority of cultivators feel ashamed of their inferiority. As the leader of Xingjing sect and the nominal supreme leader of the Wuxia League, he attached great importance to his duties, and must do his job perfectly. In his speech at the opening ceremony of the group of immortal tombs, Hichu Daoran needed to summarize and point out the focus of the next stage of the work of the Wuxia League. However, the Wuxia League involved a lot of people, so if he wanted to cover all aspects, he had to spend a lot of time. The 6 hours report was the result of his repeated simplification. If someone listened carefully, it was not difficult to find that the content had reached the level where even 1,000 gold would be hard to change a word. After the 2 leaders, it was the turn of Wang Lu, who won the Outstanding Contribution Award, to speak. However, when it was Wang Lu's turn to speak, the crowd clearly slacked off. Previously, the spell that he too and Feng Yin used was to condense the fate of the people using their own magical power. It was extremely disgusting, but the effect was astonishing. Cultivators who were not in the deity stage and held leadership positions could not use it. As for Wang Lu, who was only a high-level Shudan stage disciple, he could not count on him. On the other hand, Wang Lu, who was on the golden platform, did not mind. He deeply detested this kind of formalism, which could be called mental violence. Even though he himself, as the speaker, was actually the violent party of this activity, he did not feel the slightest bit of pleasure. Picking up the script, Wang Lu read from the script in a flat voice. However, the reaction of the audience was varied. Most of them pretended to be focused, but they were actually absent-minded. A small number of maverick people simply dozed off. Of course, there were also a lot of people who listened attentively. Because compared to the previous 2 leaders, Wang Lu's speech actually had more substance. By now, people who knew a little bit about the inside story knew that the actions of the Wuxia League and the excavation management in the Western continent were almost all in vain. The key to the group of immortal tombs was obtained by Wang Lu and his companions alone. During this period, they did not borrow the power of any sect or organization. If this matter was not circulated among many high-level cultivators, it would be hard to believe. A group of Shudan stage cultivators had completed the great undertaking that many deity stage and even supreme of unity stage could not. This was already difficult to explain with the reason of young heroes. Therefore, many people really couldn't wait to know how did Wang Lu and the others do it. Third, carefully make the relevant preparations. 1. At the organizational level, carefully select the team members, rather lack than substandard. Make full use of the power of the sect, select the strong and obedient team members of the same generation. At the same time, hire professional foreign aid to further enrich the strength. While reading the script, Wang Lu also lamented that the person who drafted this script was really powerful. He could actually summarize his several months of vivid adventure experience in such a dry and tasteless way. If he saw such a work plan a few months ago, he would have given up on the Western continent on the spot. However, the advantage of this kind of script was that it was foolproof. No matter how picky a person was, it was difficult to find any omission or taboo. Every word in the script was accurate and concise, and at the same time, rich in connotation. For example, the sentence of hiring professional foreign aid to further enrich the strength. The word hire subtly pointed out the identity of Aya, that she was not an internal member of Spirit Sword sect. In this way, even if there was a problem, they could use the excuse of a temporary worker, a foreign friend, and other reasons to shirk it. However, this sentence was placed after the selection of peers. Although it somewhat weakened the role of Aya, it highlighted the strength of the peers of Spirit Sword sect, which was obviously a politically correct rhetoric. Reading the script, Wang Lu unconsciously remembered what he heard about Holy Light religion in Dragon City of Bretonia. In Holy Light religion, there was a time when asceticism was popular, which was to quickly improve the strength through abstinence. However, other desires were fine, but if the desire to reproduce was gone, Holy Light religion would be in big trouble. The inheritance of professions in the Western continent largely relied on the power of the bloodline. This was also the case for the priests of Holy Light religion. Those with pure bloodline were more likely to perceive the Holy Light and receive the blessing of the Holy Light. And if all of these elite talents went to asceticism to practice abstinence, in the eyes of the higher-ups of the church, it was simply like sterilizing a fine stallion, utterly devoid of conscience. Therefore, after several discussions by the higher-ups, a special reproduction method was proposed. A piece of white cloth was used to cover the female's body, and a hole was dug in the key part. Then the ascetic would be separated by the white cloth and complete the reproduction through the hole. At that time, when he heard about this, Wang Lu praised the Holy Light religion who invented this method. He believed that this method was undoubtedly a powerful spiritual sterilization method, which reflected the powerful wisdom of the Western continent people. At this time, it seemed that the wisdom of the 9 regions people was not inferior. Wasn't this boring report just like a piece of white cloth that blocked all pleasure? However, from the corner of his eyes, Wang Lu saw that many of the leading cultivators on the golden platform, such as Supreme Jury of Kunlun Immortal Mountain, had an intoxicated look on their face and listened with relish. And the always serious Hichu Daoran, although there was no obvious change in his expression, he also nodded frequently, seemingly quite approving of it. Wang Lu was shocked. How powerful was his imagination to be able to turn dry words into a delightful story. He was indeed worthy to be a leader. He had already reached the realm of reading all the official documents in the world, and his heart naturally reached a climax. When Wang Lu's mood changed and his mind was completely distracted, his recitation of the manuscript was still smooth. As a Shudon stage cultivator, although his non-phase immortal heart was not as powerful as those King Pil Yuanying stage cultivators, multitasking was also a basic skill. However, because he had no interest in the official documents, he didn't think much when he recited it. When he found that some people under the stage had a strange reaction, it was already too late. On the material level, carefully choose high quality, and inexpensive magic treasure suppliers. For example, Blue River Prefecture's Broken Mountain House, which supplies flying swords. During the discount period, buy 20 magic treasure flying swords wholesale at a special discount price of 3,888 spirit stones per sword. Golden Peak Monastery, which supplies the Heart Protection Mirror, by the middle-grade magical weapon Primal Chaos Mirror at the agreed price of 9,888 spirit stones. Floating Fragrance House, by the special price Elixir. While reading the manuscript, Wang Lu's mind was somewhat muddled. The next dozens of pages of the manuscript in his hand were mostly used to introduce a bunch of suspicious products from a bunch of pheasant Shanzhai suppliers that came out of nowhere. Before he set off to the west, he did make quite adequate preparation, but he never patronized these unreliable merchants. If he wanted to purchase, he basically did it through his sect or through the mysterious Sky Mansion. So, where did these things come from? Remembering that the person who sent the manuscript to him was his beloved and poor master, Wang Lu felt that everything didn't need to be explained. At the same time, behind him, where the golden platform blocked everyone's view, Wang Lu had already heard the elders of the Lingjian school begin to stir. Third martial uncle, disciplinary elder Fang He, sternly questioned fifth junior sister about her intentions. Do you know what kind of occasion it is today? Do you want to bring shame to the whole school? Wang Wu righteously defended herself. I risked my life to get so many sponsors. Although the quality of these unscrupulous merchants' products can't be guaranteed, each of them paid a huge sum of advertising fees. Only then did I add their names in the manuscript. Just these dozens of pages, less than 10,000 words, are you afraid? Adding 10,000 words for 1,000 words, are you afraid? Whether our Lingjian school can wash away the Poor Sword School's name, depends on this. You are the Poor Sword School, your whole family is Poor Sword School. Sixth Elder Lu Li, who was in charge of the school's wealth, immediately jumped up. In the entire non-phase peak, you are the only poor person. The per capita GDP of Lingjian School is ranked in the top of the entire Wanxian League, and the per capita wealth is also in the first square array. Poor your whole family. Fang He was furious. For money, you don't care about anything. Instead, Wang Wu doubtfully asked, that's money, with money, what else do I need to worry about? Seeing that Fang He was about to punish her regardless of the people present, Wang Wu immediately added, I will hand over part of the profit. Lu Li's eyes lit up. Senior brother, please wait, listen to her share. The argument of the sect elders didn't make Wang Lu care too much. On the contrary, his mind has been attracted by other things. For the current Wang Lu, tens of millions of spirit stones were actually not important. The wealth of spirit stones was only useful for large organizations. What he cared about was the more scarce resources, such as high-quality magical weapons, or high-level cultivation methods that had enough reference value. These things were hard to find even if one had money. Gold, silver, or spirit stones were not easy to use. Usually, a higher currency unit was used for transactions. At present, the most popular method was to use high-quality magical weapons. This point actually had something in common between the East and West continents. In the Western continent, above the magic coin was a treasure called Jordan's Stone. As for high-quality magical weapons, for Wang Lu, it was not easy to get his hands on them. However, now it seemed like he saw a shortcut to get rich. Oh, I almost forgot, I am now a celebrity. I have sat with He Tu, Zhuri, Tianluan, and the others. Moreover, I also have the identity of the lead disciple of the 5 uniques. I am already a standard Big V. Chapter 368. In the astonishment of countless people, Wang Lu finally finished reading his report. At this time, the quarrel between the several elders behind him also came to an end. Wang Lu clearly heard that the disciplinary elder wanted to confiscate all of his master's illegal gains in accordance with the sect's rules. His master protested several times, but to no avail. She could only swallow the bitter fruit and put on a sullen face. Seeing her expression as if she had just been raped, Fang He was helpless and did not pursue the matter further. Seeing this, Wang Lu could not help but sneer. His third uncle thought that Wang Wu was too simple. If this fellow's wealth was really robbed, she would not have this expression. But now, this "I admit defeat" attitude could only mean one thing: she lied about her illegal gains. The millions of spirit stones that his third uncle collected were simply irrelevant to her. The advertising fee that those sponsors gave her was not just a mere millions of spirit stones. At least, the first sum of money was just a deposit, and later on, there would definitely be a high percentage. Actually, if one thought about it, how could 1,000,000 spirit stones cover the price of a public advertisement in the highest specification meeting of the Wuxia League? However, there was no need for him to say these words. When he returned to the mountain, he would slowly discuss the percentage with his master. After all, he could not advertise while she took the benefit. Moreover, after Wang Lu finished reading the draft, it was time for the most important agenda item of the day, the opening of the group of immortal tombs. The entrance to the group of immortal tombs was originally hidden at the bottom of the ancient sword tomb. However, in recent years, the excavation management had fully excavated and transformed the ancient sword tomb. And in order to cater to today's ceremony, they also deliberately built the entrance into a Real gate and placed it on the vast grassland. If there was only one gate, it would look very lonely. However, when Feng Yin Daoist master raised his hand and held up the key to open the immortal tombs, the entire grassland lit up. The overgrown weeds and the rooted soil sunk one after another, and a complete city rose from the soil amidst people's exclamation. Looking at the amazed eyes of the people present, the several high-level excavation management on the golden platform secretly nodded their heads. This city was actually a gift project, specially built for the opening ceremony. It looked magnificent and orderly, but in fact, it only took a short 3 days from the establishment to the completion. Several nascent soul cultivators joined hands to cast a spell, and a city that could accommodate tens of thousands of people came into being. To a large extent, this city was based on the Taobao city of the Western continent. However, the layout of the city was more reasonable and orderly. The main purpose of the city was to build a large number of supporting facilities around an inexhaustible treasure house. On one hand, it was convenient for cultivators to enter the group of immortal tombs to dig for treasures. On the other hand, it was also to fully explore the commercial value of the group of immortal tombs. After seeing the Taobao city of the Western continent, no one doubted the attraction of the group of immortal tombs to the cultivators of 9 regions. This place would certainly become one of the most popular areas in 9 regions, and the area around the entrance of the group of immortal tombs was truly a land of gold. The core area of the city had already been divided by the 5 uniques of the Wuxia League before the construction started. Among them, the 2 most valuable pieces of land around the entrance belonged to Lingjian School and Xingjing sect respectively. The rest of the land belonged to 10,000 Arts sect, Kunlun Immortal sect, and Royal Soldier sect. Actually, when Feng Yin Daoist master proposed the project, he could also rely on the outstanding contribution of Wang Lu and his authority in the excavation management to let Lingjian School get more benefits. It was just that, after discussing with Lu Li, he thought that with the size and characteristics of Lingjian School, it was meaningless to occupy too many areas, so it was better to use it as a favor. In addition to the areas that have already been reserved, there were still a lot of vacant land left in the city, which was planned to be auctioned at the right time, and the proceeds would be managed by the excavation management. After the emergence of this city, Feng Yin Daoist master named it Plentiful City, which implied a harvest city, and also a kind of commemoration. Before the Age of Chaos, there was a city in the 9 regions that was famous for its richness, which was also called Plentiful City. However, this plentiful city, which contained infinite future, was destined to be a foil today, because the gate of the immortal graveyard was about to be truly opened. The key to the immortal graveyard was jointly held by Hichu Daoran and Feng Yin, and they slowly put it into the gap of the gate. After a short yet long wait, the heavy door suddenly opened, revealing an expanse of star-like brilliance. In the midst of the fine light, a nebula-like whirlpool slowly and powerfully rotated. At the same time, an old voice came from the gate. After waiting for so long, I finally see a living person. As soon as the voice fell, several figures flashed in front of the gate. Tian Luan, Zhuri, and Kuqin instantly stood beside He Tu and Feng Yin. The leaders of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League had gathered and confronted the voice from the gate. Regardless of how much preparation the excavation management and the Wanxian League had done in advance, there were still many unknowns in the world after the gate was opened, and unknowns also meant risks. Wang Lu's experience in the lowest level of the ancient sword tomb had more or less spread out, and the story of sword demon Zhong Xingming was also well known by many archaeology enthusiasts. And if a Dixian-level character who withstood the 4 in 9 divine tribulations was only used to guard the gate, then it would not be strange for anything to appear in the immortal graveyard. And once there was a real danger, these leader-level cultivators were naturally duty-bound. Just now, they sat upright on the golden platform, looking down at all living beings. Behind this privilege also meant a special obligation. For Supremes of Unity Stage and One Peak Deity Stage, in fact, after defeating the Prophet of Holy Light Religion outside of Taba City, no one dared to regard Feng Yin as an ordinary Peak Deity Stage cultivator. With such power, even if a true immortal came down to earth, it would not be good. The voice from the gate paused for a moment, and then somewhat helplessly said, "Don't be so nervous, I haven't eaten people for a long time." Seeing that there was no response from the 5 people at the gate, the voice from the gate was somewhat disappointed. After tens of thousands of years, it's not easy to make a joke, but no one responded to it. Has the current immortal cultivation world become so impetuous and utilitarian that they don't even have the mood to talk to an old man who has just been unearthed? Very well, as you wish, I'll go straight to the point. Being able to open this group of immortal tombs proves that you should be aware of its value, but you may not realize the price behind this value. Upon hearing this, the 5 peerless cultivators had different complexions. After a long time, Feng Yin slowly opened his mouth and tentatively said, "This immortal tomb uses the power of the Feng Shui line as the core, and the words and deeds of the cultivators that go deep into it lead to the cause and effect to create suitable magical treasures. The so-called price is the experiential learning that the cultivators have to go through." This answer was, of course, wrong, at least far from perfect. It was true that this was the basic principle of this immortal tomb, but it was like going to a restaurant to eat and only calculating the cost of the ingredients, not considering that the chef and the waiter also have to live. The power of the Feng Shui line and the cause and effect of the cultivators were only the basic cost of creating magical treasures in the immortal tomb. The existence of this group of immortal tombs must have a more profound meaning. Sure enough, the voice from the gate said, "This is not the price. The treasures in this group of immortal tombs have an inestimable value for you right now. With all due respect, after sleeping for tens of thousands of years, I am quite disappointed to see that the current 9 regions has become so weak, and if you want to obtain the treasures, experiential learning alone is far from enough. Would the people who built this group of immortal tombs care about the experiential learning process of you, the later generations?" Feng Yin said, "So what exactly do you want?" "Responsibility." The voice from the gate lightly said, "The group of immortal tombs is the legacy left by the ancestors. If you want to take away the treasures, you have to inherit the will of the ancestors, which is a necessary responsibility." Feng Yin was not surprised by this. It should be said that in the past few years of preparation for the opening of the group of immortal tombs, the research on this group of immortal tombs had been carried out in depth, which was enough for people to make a preliminary judgment. The people who built this group of immortal tombs were a group of great pioneers. They built this group of immortal tombs for a noble reason. During this period, they traveled all over the 9 regions, and even traveled thousands of miles to the western continent to exchange skills with the sages from afar. Then, with the knowledge obtained from the other continent, they finally completed this group of immortal tombs. Hearing this, everyone present understood why the Golden King's treasure house and the group of immortal tombs were similar, and why the key to the group of immortal tombs was in the hands of Golden King. They also had a vague answer. However, people were also more curious. What was the purpose of the people in the past to build a great building that had no meaning to them at all costs? As for the specific reason, you will know it when you gradually go deeper. This is not a one-off deal, but a step-by-step test. The deeper you go into the group of immortal tombs, the more benefits you can get, but at the same time, the greater the responsibility you have to shoulder. At this time, someone suddenly asked, "What if you just want to take the benefit but not the responsibility? Is there any shortcut to take?" Such a naked and even shameless question, among the 10,000 people present, only one person dared to ask it so openly. Everyone turned their eyes and saw a woman with snow-white clothes and fluttering long hair, who was maliciously smiling. Behind the woman, several elders of the Lingjian school were trying to stop her from speaking, but they were forced by her invisible sword Qi to not get close to her. The voice from the gate was not angry. "That's impossible. When you get the treasure, you will naturally shoulder the responsibility that you should shoulder. Can't it be divided?" Wang Wu seemed to have guessed something. The smile on her face gradually became a bit more dignified. She then picked up the wine gourd from her waist and drank more than half of it in one go. The voice from the gate didn't answer. After a long time, it let out a sigh. It feels good to talk to a living person. Even if it's only 2 or 3 sentences, it's better than talking to myself in the immortal tombs for tens of thousands of years. Unfortunately, my power has been exhausted. Future generations, try your best to explore the immortal tombs, not only for the ancestors, but also for yourselves. With that, the nebula vortex inside the gate automatically dispersed, and the voice also disappeared without a trace. However, the stars behind the gate became more dazzling and soon connected into one, as if silently welcoming the arrival of people. The leaders of the 5 great sects looked at each other, and then Feng Yin took the initiative to step forward. "As the director of the excavation management, I should take the lead." Hichu Daoran nodded and did not object. The first to enter the immortal tomb was, of course, likely to get the greatest benefit, but it was also likely to encounter the greatest danger. It was best for Feng Yin to take on this responsibility. As for him, Hichu Daoran, as the leader of the Wanxian League, it was not appropriate for him to force himself to take the lead at any time. "I'll also go with you. I don't want to wait for a moment longer for the secret left by Dixian." With that, Supreme Tianluan also took a step forward, intending to go with them. For the first exploration of the group of immortal tombs, these 2 were enough. Even if other people had the intention to go, they didn't think that they were worthy to go with Tianluan and Feng Yin. The 2 sect leaders looked at each other. With Feng Yin in the lead and Tianluan in the back, they walked into the gate one after the other. While everyone was watching and wishing them well, a leisurely figure slowly walked into the gate. His pace was indescribably bold and confident. That light and gentle posture seemed as if the 2 people in front of him were just the pioneers, while he was the real protagonist. That person was Wang Lu. Chapter 369. Sometimes, a maverick act under the watchful eyes of the public would often become smooth because of the inaction of the highly shocked audience. For example, at this moment, when Wang Lu strode behind Supreme Tian Luan, ready to step into the group of immortal tombs, the surrounding Yuanying deity stage cultivators stared with their eyes wide open, stunned, but no one stopped him. Because everyone thought that this was a special program, which must contain a deep meaning, it was just that they didn't know much about it. Even Hichu Daoran just stared at Wang Lu seriously without saying a word. However, before Wang Lu could cross the door in front of everyone's astonished eyes, a powerful palm firmly pressed him on his shoulder. "Brat, do you want to die?" Wang Lu looked at his master in surprise. If she didn't intervene, he would have been able to fool his way in. As for how much risk there would be in the group of immortal tombs, in fact, there really wouldn't be much risk. For the group of immortal tombs, Wang Lu, as the holder of the map, knew more than anyone present after years of analysis. Although there were dangers there, it was not a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. At least the first few levels were not life-threatening. However, before he could insist on defending himself, his master's words made his face sink. "You want to take that thing in your non-phase immortal heart to take risks? Do you really want to die?" While speaking, Wang Lu simply couldn't refute. His master lifted him up and poured a magical power homologous to non-phase method into his body, making him unable to move. Then she flew away, leaving no room for doubt. This was the first time for Wang Lu to discover that his master's flying sword could be so fast. She, a mere king pill cultivator, stepped on her emerald green bamboo sword, crisscrossing through the clouds, and actually traveled thousands of miles in an instant. From the southern heaven region to the Blue River region, it only took them a cup of tea's time to travel tens of thousands of miles. Wang Lu only felt a blur in front of him. In front of him, he and his master had returned to the territory of Spirit Sword Mountain. After returning to Non-Phase Peak, his master didn't even say a word. With a gloomy face, she directly carried Wang Lu into the bamboo room where the two of them had lived together for more than 10 years. She then pushed him down onto the bed and reached out to take off his clothes. Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. "Hey, is this some kind of peculiar welfare treatment on Non-Phase Peak? It's not that I can't accept it, but how about I take a bath first and then eat a kilogram of oysters? It's better for you and for me." His master sneered disdainfully, and then reached out to take off his red and white Taoist robe without stopping. His movements were so smooth and natural that it was hard to describe it as a hands-on familiarity. When Wang Wu continued to reach for her belt, Wang Lu felt that something was wrong. Over the past decade or so, the master and disciple had indeed joked about this a lot. However, apart from joking, the two of them had a very subtle grasp of propriety and had never crossed the line. And now, this scene, no matter how he looked at it, looked like a scene of rape. Not to mention crossing the line, it was absolutely a criminal act. However, seeing his master's solemn face, without the slightest bit of lewd intention, Wang Lu could only guess, could it be that master has been teaching me for so many years, just so that one day, she can use my yang to supplement her yin, to fill the gap in her cultivation base and moral integrity? Now that I have successfully reached Shudan stage, and there is a quasi-legendary Shi cultivator inside my body, it is a legendary level tonic. She only needs to sit on the ground and absorb the soil, and then she can say goodbye to the King Pill stage and become a glorious Taoist master of Yuanying stage, making up for the gap with the other elders of Heavenly Sword Hall, and the monthly offering can also go up a step. With such a reliable reason, Wang Lu could not imagine any reason for his master not to be blessed with him. However, the next moment, Wang Lu knew that he was wrong. Because after his master took off his pants, she took out a box of ointment from nowhere and applied it on his body. The ointment was cool to the touch, and a trace of coolness gradually penetrated along the skin, from his blood vessels to his jade mansion immortal heart, covering his golden non-phase immortal heart with a layer of green light. Ice heart fat? His master coldly snorted. Otherwise, how could it be Indian divine oil? You are a reckless fool. Do you really think that with your 35th layer of non-phase immortal heart, you can suppress a devil-level devil for a long time? A devil-level devil. His master said, I don't know how it is divided in the Western continent, but in my opinion, it is a powerful devil. It is invisible and invisible, born from the evil thoughts of people, and is the most strange and difficult to deal with. I don't know what method you use to seriously injure it, and then use your non-phase immortal heart to suppress it. Your idea is good, but this method is simply courting death. This kind of devil can be suppressed for a while, but for a long time, do you think you won't die fast enough? Wang Lu's complexion became serious, and he operated his primordial spirit to sweep through his body. Invisible and invisible. Even non-phase method can't detect the abnormality? That depends on whose non-phase method it is. Is it you? Hee hee. After sneering, Wang Wu explained, because it is too weak, it can only parasitize in your body for a short period of time. Your non-phase immortal heart has a solid foundation, so its parasitizing progress is very slow, but at the same time, it didn't show any abnormality. Last time when I saw you in the Western continent, I didn't notice it because of a moment of negligence, but when you came back. TSK, the death omen on top of your head can dazzle my eyes. Is it really that powerful? Otherwise, why do you think I have been standing behind you when you were reading the report? Listening to such a boring thing gives me a headache, and in the middle of it, I still have to fight with that stupid third brother. Master's painstaking care, isn't it to help you suppress the devil? Wang Lu was surprised. Isn't it to supervise me to finish reading the sponsorship speech? Nonsense, with your temper, you would definitely come back to me after you finished reading. Do you need to supervise me? At the same time, she stretched out her hand and pressed it on Wang Lu's chest. Pure and abundant magical power of non-phase poured into Wang Lu's body. Like an elite army, it completely surrounded the non-phase immortal heart that was shrouded in dim light in his jade mansion. Okay, leave the rest to me. Be a good boy and go to sleep. As soon as her voice fell, Wang Lu felt his head sink, and drowsiness came unstoppably. When he woke up, the light in the bamboo room was dim, and the blood-colored setting sun slanted down from the window, bringing a trace of warmth. There was a faint fragrance of wine in the room, which doubled the warmth. Judging from the light, Wang Lu guessed that he should have slept for half a day. Previously, when he was brought back to Spirit Sword Mountain by his master in the southern heaven region, it was not long after noon, and now it was just evening. The next moment, his master's lazy voice came from the hall outside the bedroom. You finally woke up, young Master Lu? TSK, you really can sleep, it's been 3 years and 6 months. Wang Lu suddenly got up. 3 years and 6 months? His master smiled maliciously in the hall. Yes, you didn't expect it, right? When he woke up, it was already the blue sea and mulberry fields, and the world had changed. By the way, 2 days ago was your junior sister Lu Li's wedding, but you just slept and didn't attend it. Are you regretful? Wait a minute, little Lu Li's wedding? Yes, the other party is Zhan Zai of the 10,000 Arts sect. The current Taoist master Zai can be considered a perfect match. Zhan Zai secretly loves little Lu Li, you should know this, right? In the past few years when you were asleep, Zhan Zai launched a crazy attack. The key is that he sent a lot of betrothal gifts to the mountain, full of sincerity, which is really hard to refuse. Wang Lu frowned. And then? And then, you slept for too long, and the lead disciple position was taken away by Zhu Shiyao. Although I helped you fight for it, she has successfully advanced to the King Pill stage, and in the group of immortal tombs, she has repeatedly shocked the world. Her brilliance even surpassed Xiong Hua, so you, a sleeping beauty, really have no competitiveness. Although in the past few years, you have repeatedly created miracles, but the previous achievements of the King Pill are actually empty. Is there anything else? Then, your wisdom sect has been disbanded, and several vice sect leaders have been fighting for power and profit. However, you, the sect leader, are not there, so there is no one to suppress them. Therefore, they soon went their own way and scattered. Once wisdom sect has no backbone, the next step is to fade into the crowd, and then be annexed by other forces. TSK, after 3 years and 6 months, I have actually become so miserable. Wang Lu's tone was full of disbelief. Wang Wu was actually indifferent. That's normal. Since your debut, you have had many fortuitous encounters, and you have advanced triumphantly. However, after all, your foundation is shallow. Once you stop, it's like sailing against the current. Everything in the past is easy to vanish. However, this is also a good thing for you. You should calm down and seriously cultivate for a period of time. As a cultivator, your first priority is to cultivate, not to stir up trouble everywhere. During this period of time, you should steadily advance to the King Pill stage. Wang Lu was silent for a long time, and then suddenly smiled. Although many regrettable things have happened in the past, there is always one good thing, and that is, the sharing fee that you owe me can be accumulated with interest for 3 years and 6 months. As soon as his voice fell, his master jumped up. Damn, where did the sharing fee come from? Where did the interest come from? Wang Lu smiled faintly. What, do you want to renege on your debt? That's fine too. Master, please pay with your body. With your beauty, this time it will be 200 copper coins, okay? Wang Wu stared at her disciple's eyes seriously. When she saw that there was only ridicule in his eyes, she knew that her trick had failed. She could only shrug her shoulders in boredom. As expected, I can't fool you. How boring. By the way, you really didn't sleep for that long. How did you find out about the problem? Nonsense, how could Xiao Liuli marry someone else? Of course, no one would believe your nonsense. Wang Wu was dumbfounded. She kept feeling that her disciple's intelligence seemed to have gone in the wrong direction, but she didn't know how to correct it. Anyway, look at this. As Wang Wu spoke, she used her finger to tip a gray ball on the table in the hall. Wang Lu got up and put on his clothes. When he went to the hall to take a look, he couldn't help but be amused. Is this your ovulation period? Wang Wu smiled coldly. No, this is your egg. Wang Lu's smile froze. He felt as if a certain part of his body had turned cold. Chapter 370. His master's words caused Wang Lu to subconsciously feel a bit cold. His master stole something important while he was sleeping? Well, the truth was certainly not that strange. As a cultivator of non-phase method, Wang Lu's ability to control his body had reached a very high level. He could perceive even the slightest loss, let alone a vital object. This is taken from your body. It's in the shape of an egg, so of course it's your egg. His master's face remained unchanged as she blurted out nonsense. She then said, I've studied it for a while, but I found nothing. Don't you boast that you're the top student of Spirit Sword Sect? Then the important task of revealing the secret is handed over to you. Study it carefully. With that, Wang Wu threw the gray ball to Wang Lu. Put it away. This kind of thing is rare in the continent. This is. Wang Lu pinched the ball and felt that it was cool and smooth. When he swept it with his primordial spirit, it was like a void. However, thinking that it was taken from his own body, it was not difficult to guess its content. Faceless one? Yes, it's that devil. After I caught it, I casually cooked it and intended to refine it into an elixir. As a result, perhaps the nature of the devil in the Western continent is different from that in 9 regions, so I didn't refine the elixir. Instead, I refined it into an unknown gray egg. I thought that since you're a boy, you might find it useful, so I left it for you. Hearing this, Wang Lu felt a pain in the ass. 3 Eyes Supreme is famous, but 3 Eggs Supreme is absolutely abnormal. However, he still put away the gray ball. Although Wang Wu was a pain in the ass, she was reliable in the issue of training her disciple. Since she wanted him to accept it, there must be a reason for him to accept it. Well then, the hidden danger in my body has been solved, so there's nothing for me to do here, right? Wang Lu said as he was about to leave, but his mind had already flown to the entrance of the group of immortal tombs in the southern heaven region. What's the hurry? First, refine the king pill on the mountain. King pill? Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. He hastily took out a jar of honey from his mustard seed bag, smeared it on the gray ball, and then brushed it with a golden color. The golden core is here, please check it. Stop right there. This time, Wang Wu unceremoniously pulled her disciple and nailed him in place. It's useless for you to go now. You won't be able to drink the soup. 3 days ago, the first and second batch of people who entered the group of immortal tombs have returned. If you go now, you won't even be able to join the third batch. Wait, the first and second batches? How long have I been asleep? Wang Wu replied, it's not as long as 3 years, but it's not as short as 4 hours either. 1 month and 3 days is enough for you to miss all the opportunities to show off. Wang Lu was even more surprised. He actually slept for a month. TSK, how serious is that faceless one's parasite on me? Wang Wu waved her hand. Actually, it's not that serious. If it's really serious, I wouldn't have the time to save you. In fact, you could have resuscitation on the 3rd day. I gave you some medicine that made you sleep for a month. Wang Lu was speechless. His master's style of action was really unpredictable. I won't stop you. You're definitely going to the group of immortal tombs. If nothing goes wrong, you're bound to win a series of battles. Then, you'll revel in that and find other troublesome things to do. It's not that I want to deliberately hit you, but as your master, I have to remind you that you should stop playing around. Don't forget what your job is. Wang Wu's complexion was unprecedentedly dignified, so much so that Wang Lu could not relax. Do you think there's a problem with my direction? A big problem. Wang Wu said, use your brain to think about it. This time, you risked your life and struggled for half a year in the Western continent. What have you gained? Your strength has been greatly improved. Your magical treasure has been greatly upgraded. Your method has been comprehensively strengthened. In my opinion, except for the change in the way I looked at you, you actually haven't gained anything. Yes, you've obtained the key to the group of immortal tombs, which can be considered as holding your head high in 9 regions. However, now when people talk about you and Xiaofan, they obviously think that the latter is stronger. Because she is the king pill, while you are not, and in the immortal cultivation world, strength is still the number 1. Wang Lu sighed. I know, I don't need you to nag me. Jindan stage is a watershed. Before Jindan, no matter how illustrious the achievements are, it's just a false reputation, right? What Wang Lu said was the rule of the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions. The king pill and the non-king pill were 2 completely different concepts. Any Taoist master of the king pill was a precious treasure of the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions. From the beginning, a cultivator would have to go through the 3 stages of Qi cultivating stage, foundation establishment stage, and Shudan stage, breaking through the difficult test of the world and oneself, and finally achieving the king pill, which was a very great achievement. In the entire immortal cultivation world, out of 10,000 cultivators who entered the qi cultivating stage, no more than 10 could eventually achieve the king pill. For all living beings, the Taoist master of the king pill was already high above, standing at the top of the world. In fact, the king pill was indeed a completely different stage. In the first few stages, a cultivator was just a cultivator. However, once one achieved the king pill, one would have the title of Taoist master, which meant that one would have the capital to establish a foothold in the immortal cultivation world. In simple words, it meant that one could be truly like a human in the immortal cultivation world. Achieving the king pill was a qualitative change for a cultivator, and the difficulty of this promotion could be imagined. Unless one did not hesitate to sacrifice their future and became the king pill for the sake of the king pill, otherwise, any orthodox cultivator would have to stop for a long time on the path from Shudan stage to king pill. It was even more difficult and cautious than using the king pill to advance to Yuanying stage. Wang Lu's expectation for himself was to achieve the king pill in at least 10 years, and if all went well, in 5 years. With his current high-level Shudan stage, this was already a very conservative calculation. However, his master's thought process was faster than his. Within 2 years, I want you to become the Taoist master of the king pill, and then be independent. Wang Lu was really taken aback. 2 years. Hey, do you have to be so ruthless? We've lived together for more than 10 years, yet you're actually so anxious to drive me away. 1 day as a master and disciple means 100 days of kindness. According to the general rule of the Lingjian school or the 9 regions immortal cultivation world, once a cultivator achieved the king pill, he would be like a young man in the mortal world, and would embark on the road of independence and self-improvement. Generally speaking, he would leave the position of a disciple and enjoy more freedom. At the same time, he would also lose the excessive protection of the sect. Of course, this rule also differed from sect to sect. For those low-rank sects, it was too extravagant to need the king pill to be considered as an adult. Shudan stage and even foundation establishment stage disciples would have to work like cattle and horses for the sect. At the level of the 5 uniques of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, although there were not as many Jindan stage cultivators as Yuanying stage cultivators, it was somewhat difficult for a mere Jindan stage cultivator to be independent and take charge. At least, Wang Lu did not intend to leave the protection of the sect after achieving the king pill. It was not that he could not do it, but it was not necessary. For Wang Lu's resistance, Wang Wu just sneered. You think it's too difficult and you can't do it? I've already taken care of you for 2 years with the king pill. Do you know what's the current situation in 9 regions? Although Wang Wu asked about the situation in 9 regions, Wang Lu knew that her focus was on the situation of his peers in 9 regions. Shengjing sect's Qianghua is indeed worthy to be the lead disciple of the Wanxian League. Not only does she have the king pill, but her state of mind is also outstanding. That day when their eyes met, the feeling in his heart made Wang Lu's evaluation of Qianghua was quite high. Although Kunlun sect's Zhou Mumu is not good at fighting, she has accumulated a lot of experience, so her cultivation base should be getting faster and faster. When we met at the ancient sword tomb that day, her cultivation base was not particularly outstanding, but in these 2 years, it is very possible for her to have a breakthrough. For Zhou Mumu, whom he once teamed up with, Wang Lu was not stingy to give a positive evaluation, and his inference was also confirmed. Wang Wu said, 3 months later, Zhou Mumu will attempt the king pill under the protection of the sect's elders. Don't ask me why her cultivation base is so fast, I'm too lazy to explain. Wang Lu didn't care and continued to comment, the cultivators of Royal Soldier sect have been low-key in recent years, so I don't know much about it. But a month ago, I saw Supreme Kuchin. The scar-faced youth behind Kuchin should be the lead disciple of Royal Soldier sect, and his cultivation base is not below Qianghua. Yes, he has the most seniority, and his cultivation time is the longest among the lead disciples of this generation. Although he has no outstanding reputation, underestimating Royal Soldier sect is the stupidest thing. Wang Lu nodded and then said, as for 10,000 arts beheading Zai, Humph, daring to have an idea on little Lu Li, he is doomed to be alone for a lifetime, nothing to worry about. Wang Wu said, hey, the speed of your moral integrity loss is too fast. Wang Lu shrugged. Finally, back to our Lingjian school, there are 4 lead disciples, one who has been missing for years, little Lu Li's brilliant sword heart. Her root bone qualification is hard to find in the world, and her cultivation method is also well prepared. Although her current strength is below me, once she crosses the threshold of the king pill, I'm afraid it would be difficult for her to find a match among cultivators of the same level. When my non-phase sword meets her skybreaker, I have to consider a bit. As for big sister, that's out of the norm, so I won't discuss it. At that time, when Wang Lu and Zhu Shiyao met Sword Demon in the ancient sword tomb, due to a freak combination of factors, Zhu Shiyao's purple mansion was occupied by Sword Demon's primordial spirit. Later on, it was a blessing in disguise. Her primordial spirit greatly evolved, and her strength skyrocketed. Moreover, her cultivation time was longer than others, and her stellar sword technique was also exceptionally powerful. Although she had not crossed the threshold of the king pill, Wang Lu felt that even Qianghua might not be her opponent. Perhaps, among her peers, her comprehensive strength was the real number one. Your analysis is good, so you see, the advantage that you have established among your peers is now very weak. Although in a one-on-one fight, even Zhu Shiyao might not be able to win against you, within 5 years, she must cross the king pill tribulation. Once she becomes the king pill, her strength will advance by leaps and bounds, and with one sword strike, she can skewer 10 people like you, turning them into candied haws. There's no need to say about little Lu Li, right now her strength is a bit weak because she hasn't gotten used to the Skybreaker, this kind of immortal sword. In short, you have to have a little sense of crisis. The title of number one among your peers, you can't sit still anymore. If you don't hold it tight, you really won't be able to hold it. Wang Lu was curious. Why should I care about the title of number one or number two? His master lightly explained, because the difference in sponsorship fees is very big. Chapter 371. Regardless of the reason why his master prevented Wang Lu from triumphantly entering the group of immortal tombs, after Wang Lu slept for more than a month, many things had indeed changed. First of all, the exploration of the group of immortal tombs had achieved initial results. Feng Yin and Tian Luan, the first batch to enter the group of immortal tombs, returned to 9 regions half a month ago and achieved impressive results. In the group of immortal tombs, they saw tens of thousands of innumerable independent spaces, which were called immortal dreamlands. Moreover, they actually opened up a dreamland. In the dreamland, they experienced a harsh test and won the battle. 2 low-rank spiritual treasures. For Unity Stage and Deity Stage cultivators, they were negligible. However, they were, after all, spiritual treasures, enough for 99% of the cultivators in 9 regions to scramble for them. After Feng Yin and Tian Luan, the second batch to enter was the younger generation disciples, headed by Qianghua. Zhou Mumu and Zhan Zai also participated, but they acted separately. Half a month later, Qianghua passed the test and obtained 3 low-rank magical treasures, while Zhou Mumu and Zhan Zai each obtained 2 magical treasures. As for the elite disciples of the other sects, some succeeded and some failed, but most of them still gained something. After 2 rounds, people had a deeper understanding of the group of immortal tombs. That place was indeed an inexhaustible treasure house. In terms of the richness of the collection, it was even far above the Golden King's treasure house in Western Continent. It was just that, to obtain the treasure, the difficulty had increased a lot. First of all, there were various kinds of tests. What Tian Luan and Feng Yin experienced, the two of them did not disclose. However, in the second round, the experience of the disciples who entered the group of immortal tombs was widely circulated. Fairy Qianghua had entered a deep mountain, which was filled with demons and devils. After she killed the demons and devils, she found their treasures in their caves, which were 3 low-grade magical weapons. Zhou Mumu's experience was quite strange. She entered a dangerous place, where the environment was so bad that it was difficult for her, a peak Shudan stage cultivator, to survive. Fortunately, she met a seriously injured senior cultivator, whom she healed with her own medical skills. After that senior cultivator gave her the way to survive, he gave her several magical treasures. Zhan Zai encountered 2 senior cultivators. The 2 of them were arguing about the improvement of a cultivation technique. After listening for a while, Zhan Zai was unable to stop himself from joining in. In the end, after discussing for half a month, they finally reached a preliminary result. The 2 magic artifacts were Zhan Zai's reward. Most of the experience of the other cultivators was similar. The dreamland they entered was mostly related to their own specialty, and the feedback was mostly useful. Although the grade was not high, it was because they did not go deep into the immortal dream. According to the existing clues, after getting the treasure, if they did not hurry to withdraw but continued to go deeper, they would get more benefits. However, in addition to this, people also found that there were strict restrictions in the group of immortal tombs. First of all, the magical treasures could only be used by themselves and could not be transferred to other people. This was the biggest problem, which made the outermost layer of the group of immortal tombs quite useless. Feng Yin and Tian Luan each obtained a spiritual treasure, but they could not give it to their disciples. For them, the worst props they had were middle-rank spiritual treasures. As for the low-rank magical treasure that Qianghua obtained, it was worthless to the lead disciple who had been trained with the sect's resources. Therefore, if they really wanted to get substantial benefits, they had to continue to go deeper. However, when they thought about the day when they opened the door, the voice inside said that the more harvest, the greater the responsibility, which inevitably made people hesitate. Therefore, the third round of development had to wait for a while, waiting for everyone to fully absorb the experience of the first 2 rounds before making a plan. And the development team was also in preparation. For the entire Wanxian League, the opening of the group of immortal tombs was tantamount to the arrival of a new era, which nurtured the infinite future. Let alone entering the door, even the plentiful city outside the door seemed to be changing with each passing day, full of vitality. The southern heaven region had become the focus of the entire 9 regions. Unfortunately, for someone on Spirit Sword Mountain, all of this was destined to be a story. TSK, this is simply unbearable, this group of idiots. The immortal dream land of the group of immortal tombs clearly needs to be developed by a moderately large team. Through the complementarity of the team members, they can complete difficult tasks and obtain treasures that are beyond their own stage. A lot of clues are obvious, so why do they need to be so careful in developing it? It's simply a waste of time. In the lobby of the humble inn, Wang Lu held a newspaper and then put his legs on the table. His body swayed, and the stool under him slanted. Along with the swaying, it issued a creaking sound. A steady rhythm reverberated in the inn. It was just that, in the sound, Wang Lu's own strong impatience was revealed. But this ear-piercing melody was soon interrupted. The lady boss of the inn angrily slapped the counter. The one who can't stand it is me, okay? Do you have to be so bored that you came all the way to my place? You don't stay in the inn, you don't order food, you just want to read your broken newspaper. Wang Lu lazily said, I don't want to eat because I just ate too much in the cafeteria, you know what I mean. If a Shudon stage cultivator really wants to eat to their heart's content, they can even eat an elephant. But if they eat a chef's cooking, I'm afraid even a Supreme of Unity stage would not have an appetite. The lady boss weakly said, yes, 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 I know you've suffered at Aya's place. But instead of coming here every day to complain, why don't you just speak frankly with her? Wang Lu lightly turned a page of the newspaper and said, Aya has completed her vow. Her spirit of the brave departed is perfect, and then her spirit and body have become one. If we really fight now, I estimate that even Tian Yu might not be able to win against her, yet you want me to speak frankly in front of her? The lady boss praised, you really have a firm and unyielding character. Wang Lu said, as for me not staying in the inn, it's because the Wanxian League has recently launched an anti-pornography campaign. I think it's not appropriate for a single man and a single woman to come here and get a room. It doesn't matter if I cheat your black inn, but I, a great celebrity, don't want to go in like this. As soon as his voice fell, a jar of fine Nuerhong flew over like a boulder. After leaving the Ru family inn, Wang Lu's mood was still a bit depressed. Through the newspaper of the Shun Feng Bank, he had a panoramic view of the magnificent changes in the outside world. As a professional adventurer, he was really eager to try it, but unfortunately, he could not participate in it. Because his master had given a death order that he could not go down the mountain until he reached the peak of Shudon stage, and his cultivation method was completely compatible with his realm. If there was a violation, it would be simple. During the 1 month that Wang Lu had been asleep, his master had done too many tricks, such as taking some indecent photos with a recording crystal. If he dared to go down the mountain, she would dare to publish it. Wang Lu had no doubt that with his master's lower limit, she would absolutely do such a thing. The reason why she did not set her goal as achieving the King Pill was that the King Pill required a certain opportunity, and it could not be achieved by just hard work. Of course, with the qualification of the Void Spirit root, there was actually no bottleneck. If he really wanted to achieve the King Pill, he could also achieve it by practicing step by step. However, the difference in quality between the King Pill and the King Pill was so big that one could not be careless. For those mediocre people who regarded achieving the King Pill as their lifelong pursuit, they might not need to consider too much, but for Wang Lu, this step must be firm and strong. In other words, the King Pill must be the best King Pill. In order to achieve this step, in these 2 years, he must do everything he could to consolidate his foundation. Not only must he promote his high-level Shudon stage to peak Shudon stage, his non-phase sword and other methods must also reach the 50th layer. To say that it was difficult, it was not as difficult as ascending to heaven. For the current Wang Lu, he could do a lot of things in these 2 years. It was not that he did not gain anything in the Western continent. After countless harsh actual combat, his body seemed to be full of energy, just waiting to erupt. However, the days of cultivation in order to level up were really boring. After getting used to adventuring around, the days of secluded cultivation on the mountain were too hard to bear. Lu Li was taken away by his fourth uncle Zhou Ming for closed-door training. Xiao Bai accompanied his uncle Guanhai to the eastern border region to look for medicine, and the stupid dog, who had eaten something wrong, began to sleep. Even Wen Bao, Yu Xinyao, and the others were sent to Plentiful City in the southern heaven region for experiential learning. On the entire Spirit Sword Mountain, there were only 2 cooks that Wang Lu could talk to. One of them was the crazy alchemist Aya, and every time he approached her, his life would be in danger. The other one was the lady boss of Ru Family Inn, who had been harassed by Wang Lu to put up a sign at the door, Wang Lu and the dog are not allowed to enter. However, because it was hard to bear, he had to bear it. Wang Lu was very clear that his master's words were right. He must settle down and seriously cultivate for a period of time. Otherwise, his heart would never be able to calm down, and the gap between him and the other geniuses of the same generation would shrink, and then expand. Therefore, even though he had taken advantage of his master's drunken state to find his indecent photos in her inner pocket, he still insisted on staying on the mountain. Most of the day was spent in secluded cultivation, and in the middle of the break, he would harass the lady boss. In 2 years, peak shoot on stage. A year later, on the non-phase peak. Outside the narrow bamboo room, 2 figures crisscrossed like lightning. Sometimes they leaped into the air, sending out sharp sword chi, and sometimes they fought fiercely in close combat. The sound of the sword strikes was like a storm. Countless sword lights burst and burst on the non-phase peak, creating a colorful brilliance. Among the two, one was the main attacker with an overbearing momentum, while the other was the defender, struggling left and right. Among the sword lights, the voice of the master of the non-phase peak was unusually clear and loud. "Your sword moves are too slow. Simply outrageous. I fought you with my middle-level shoot on stage cultivation, but you couldn't even block 3 of my 10 sword moves. Moreover, your sword moves are weak. Are you fooling around with little Ling Er again?" "Be careful, I'll complain to the sect leader and break your legs." The master of the non-phase peak spoke harshly, and her face was full of majesty. It was just that, there was a bit of harassment in her words. However, the one who was reprimanded also unceremoniously harassed her. "What do you use to break my legs? Can a poor ghost like you afford to buy a radish? If you can't reach the 45th layer of non-phase sword before this evening, I will use your anus, do you hear me?" You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.